And we are live. Okay. Welcome everyone to a local stream. We do these every week, but this is going to be a pretty fun one because it's in Yata format, which is one of my personal favorites that I've covered on the channel here. And we actually got a fair amount of people, given that this is the day before a Yata tournament is held on Format Library. I'll left a link to Format Library in the description if you want to play in that tournament. And also, I left a link to the YGO from Zero Discord in the description if you want to play in any of these local tournaments in the future for yourself. But I think that, we've got probably enough people. I'll give a last call. Last call. If anyone, wants to dive in real quick, then I'm going to allow them probably like a minute. But other than that, this will be the last call, and we'll get the tournament started. But it should be a pretty fun one, as I said. This is a pretty popular format, and it's a pretty cool format. There's still a lot of room for innovation left, and I look forward to seeing what people will bring. But yeah, I think that it's probably good to start now. No one seems to be responding to the last call. So yeah, I'm just gonna start the tourney. Let's start. There we go. Start. Yeah, let's just use the rankings. And there we go. The tournament is starting now. So let's see what the matchups are in challenge here. And we got some pretty good matches. Ooh, 3 buys. And also plus this match buy. Well, that's what happens when you get some weird numberings there. But let's dive in to the games. Sandro Sandalo says, here we go. And yeah, here we go indeed. I'm excited to see what happens here. So I saw Dump Truck hosting, but I don't see them there. Maybe they I think they have a buy. That's why they did that. Yeah, they've got one of the buys. But anyways, we should be getting some of the other players going here. I saw Vatos hosting in the unlimited pool there. So hopefully that game will get started relatively soon now. And Danny is also hosting. But Danny, Danny is in this one. It was in the second round that I saw. Okay, and also Blah's hosting. So we've got a bunch of people hosting. Let's see when those games get going. We'll be in the unlimited watching thing. We got 2 going at once now. Let's dive into Vatos and Declan. These are 2 duelists who I haven't really featured that much on the channel, so it'll be cool to see what they're doing here. Although Declan actually was the runner-up in the first YGO from Zero monthly tournament that we actually held in Treasure. So cool to see here. Vatos starting off with a confiscation. I'm going to join the general chat here. As I like to do, get people in here talking about the games going on, if they so choose. But about just firing this confiscation, they hit a pot of greed. That's pretty good. I mean, talk about high value cards to hit out of the opponent's hand first turn. And Declan seems to have a Torrential Tribute, a Snatch Steal, a Tomato, and a Dark Hole left in hand. So kind of monster light. But those are good cards, honestly, if you are monster light, as they can clear your opponent's monsters a bit. That is going to set 1. And will they... Oh, no back row. Okay, passing to Declan. They might be afraid of a top deck like MST or Harpy's Feather Duster or something like that. But we'll just have to see. They might also just not really have much back row. There goes Tomato, hitting in to the set, and it's another Tomato. And we have someone joining the voice. Nope, I thought I heard a Discord sound. But yeah, Tomato on Tomato violence. Shame to see. But this Tomato is going to come out, bring out another Tomato. Now, here's a question. We got the TCG art and the OCG art here. Which ones do you guys prefer? Because... I don't know. I have always been a fan of the TCG art, but that also is because the TCG art's what I grew up on, and so I have a nostalgia for it. But I also think I like the teeth on the TCG art a bit better than like the sort of like jack-o'-lantern just cut out on the OCG art. But I could also see that kind of being unnerving for some people. Sandro Sandal says, I do prefer TCG art. Thank you. We've got another TCG art believer there. Have they not released a lost art of the tomato for the TCG GXE? Oh, that's actually kind of crazy. I actually thought that they had released the lost art already, but damn, that's wild. Because I feel like of the lost arts that they're gonna do, I feel like tomato is like one of the easiest lost arts to do. There's nothing like disturbing about it for children. Oh, Declan, awesome. So you are here in the stream. Cool to see. So I'll avoid saying like, oh, Declan should do this or this. But yeah, so I don't know. It seems weird. You'd think that they'd bring over tomato, but yeah, Vatos is using Prio there. Although it wouldn't necessarily matter if they weren't using Prio because the TT would kind of wind up being the same either way. But yeah, you can activate TT even if the Prio hits because the monster is summoned at that time. So yeah. And there goes the TT there. Yeah, I mean, listen, as I said, I'm not the biggest fan of the OCG art, but GXE, I agree. You got to get the lost art of the tomato because tomato is such an iconic lost art, and it is just so distinct from the TCG art. Like, we've had lost art for things that are basically the same, but like maybe with like a little bit of blood or like a cross in it or something. But we don't get lost arts for, tomato. That's kind of weird. Ooh, that Yata can go pretty hard here potentially. If Vatos doesn't have a way to clear their Mirage, then this could potentially cause them to discard a lot of cards. Also, I mean, it's not the worst for Vatos since the Mirage will keep drawing them into things if Declan doesn't have a way to clear it. So eventually they could just draw into like an MST to pop their own Mirage if they don't have it already. But it still is kind of annoying for Vatos here. And it's kind of frustrating. And if they don't have anything here, then they are going to have to discard a fair amount of cards. I forget how many there were. We also need Injection Fairy Lily. I didn't know Injection Fairy Lily had a lost art. What's the Injection Fairy Lily art? Okay, they do have the MST there. So that will allow them to not discard from the Mirage there. Is the Injection Fairy Lily art just like a bit more fan servicey? I always thought that this was the main art. And it's another TT there popping the Lily. Now Vatos is in a bit of a tough spot if they don't avoid a deal with the Yata. Because now they won't be getting any more cards. They won't be drawing into ways to deal with this. So this might be potentially the end of the game. TCG has hearts, OCG has crosses. Oh, okay, yeah. So it's another one of those things. Yeah, they cut out a lot of crosses from early Yu-Gi-Oh! And yet they're publishing Exo Sister as an archetype, and that's just a bunch of nuns. So, it seems like the TCG's gotten a bit more lax about that in recent years. But yeah, I mean, it makes sense given like I think the 90s was when the satanic panic around like D&D was happening, where they were basically like, oh, D&D is satanic, it's anti-Christian, all this stuff. So it makes sense that like Yu-Gi-Oh would want to be like, well, maybe let's get rid of the references to crosses and stuff in case anyone complains about that. Rhoda here will potentially be able to get something good for Declan here to clear like the Sangan. Obviously, an exiled into Sangan isn't the best, but there are other warriors that Declan could potentially get here. Don's Luke is a really, really good one here. You clear the card from hand. Sangan doesn't get a search, but still a bit rough. Yeah, we did get Lesser Fiend and Hades, which are arguably more demonic. So, yeah, and Yata will come down here and hit in for 1200. And this will deprive Vatos of another draw. And this might be the end of the game, depending on what Vatos has in hand. But, I mean, the fact that they've not conceded yet means that they might have something to deal with this. Could either be like a spell card to pop the Sangan and get a search, or another monster like that. So if that monster is something that will block the Sangan hit and Declan doesn't have any removal for it, this could potentially give them another draw, get them out of the situation. but it is a very, very rough spot for Vatos to be in. And yeah, it's a bit tricky. Right, Keki will come down here. And it was a Faith. This likely is the end of the game. But Vatos could potentially have some back row here that stops this. Nope, looks like they will indeed take that. And that will probably be the end of the game. However, there are, Vatos could potentially just, wait it out and just to see what's in Declan's deck a bit. Because, like, technically it does take a while for the Yata Lock to finish. And through that time, Declan will be drawing cards, have to commit more cards to field, or discard them for hand size. So Vatos will get a better idea of their deck. And so technically that's the reason why if you are in like a tournament setting in Yata format and you want to get a potential edge on your opponent, you can just sort of like wait out the Yata Lock. You will eventually lose, but like you'll get to see more of your opponent's deck. So it seems like that's what they're going with here. And so because that's happening here, I'm gonna jump into another game because this game is kind of already over and it's not really that interesting to see the rest of it. Although it will be useful for Vatos to see. So let's dive into another game here going on in the format. So we got Danny Droid versus Raindance. Let's dive into that. And this looks like a game that's been pretty intense already. We've seen some powerful cards on either side. We see that Raindance is on drop off, which means that they might be more of a like hand control style deck there. And Trap Dust Shoot as well. Trap Dust Shoot is a very interesting card in Yata format because they're just much more powerful hand rips that are not as conditional. So people generally don't play Dust Shoot that much. But in later formats, it becomes like a major card, like a very degenerate card, some people think. And I don't blame them for thinking that. But it's kind of interesting to see how it's not really that useful in Yata. But we've got another member to the stream here. Welcome Food to the stream. Happy to have you here. And let's see, is your match let's see. Spirit Reaper is not responding. Uh-oh. I mean, yeah, we might have to give them a loss potentially, depending on what happens there. Yeah, it's disappointing, but we might have to just manually lost that. I mean, I'm gonna give them a little bit more time because none of the other matches have wrapped up yet. But once another match wraps up, I think that's what I'm gonna sort of call it. So, I'll give them until one match wraps up. Yeah. Because I don't want to delay the locals too much. So I know that people have other stuff to do. And yeah, it's not that hard to show up GXE. Yeah, but also sometimes people, sign up for this like the night before and they forget about it the day after. Loud Rooster, that sound effect was Discord soundboard. You can actually like make sounds with it and stuff. And so it's kind of fun. And if people have like busy background noise or something like that, or they just don't want to necessarily, say something on stream, then that is something that they can do if they want to. But yeah, we got Gemini Elf here hitting in to Wanghu, probably. Maybe hit into the Sangam, but I think Wanghu is the better pick as, Sangam they get search. So yeah, so clearing that Wanghu. Danny Droid's down to very few cards, and that is something that a more hand control focused deck can do here. But the Sangam will help them out quite a bit. Just they need to play around the Reaper potentially. But yeah, a bit tricky. Yeah, so we'll check back in to see when like one match like wraps up. But hopefully this won't delay the tournament too much. And yeah, it's just kind of unfortunate, but that happens sometimes. So but let's see what happens here. Kind of interesting. The fact that Danny Droid set a card here means that either that card is very, very powerful and they don't want to lose it, or it's something that can actually deal with this board. Because you get to search off Sangan. Maybe they search out like Serpent, and then they don't care about losing it to Reaper. But it could just be a card. Yeah, they do just search out Serpent. Yeah, I don't hate that. They lose its Reaper, but they get back Serpent, so they just keep getting back that monster. They are running pretty low on life points, but there are ways to claw your way back from this situation, especially given that Gemini Elf has been called the Haunted. So like if you pop the call, then the elf goes away. So I think that this is still a winnable position for either player. Although Raindance is definitely favored from this position. And they are going to be setting a card here, keeping a card in hand. So that means that the card set on field might not be Serpent. And it looks like Rain's going to hit in with the Elf. It is a Fiber Jar. That is pretty good. The unfortunate thing about Fiber Jar, though, is that it kind of is rough for Danny because they're already down to 2,600 life points. And when you reset the decks, each player gets access to their power cards again. So it can actually be more of a detriment, but like they need something here, right? Like if they had set Serpent and then Reaper hit it out of hand, it's an untenable situation for them. Rainant is gaining more cards every turn. So they just kind of had to pull the Fiber Jar trigger there. But it is kind of unfortunate for them. And Rainant did not use a normal summoner set this turn, so they will be able to commit a monster to field here. And if they've got any hand rips and stuff, and given that, we did see Dust Shoot, we did see like drop off, seemed like they're all in on hand rips. This could be pretty rough for Danny. The Lingu Duo is going to come down here and hit 2 cards out of Danny's hand. And they'll hit that one. A Witch. Oh, that's a pretty good card to hit if you're Rain Dance here. And then Danny will have to decide what to discard from hand with the Duo as well. They're going to discard a TT there. Yeah, I think that's probably right. Like, the traps are kind of going to be a bit weird here. Oh, and Rain is just setting 1 passing. So no monsters to commit. It's kind of interesting. Maybe they've got a TT of their own. They don't want to pop their own monster. Looks like Danny's going to set 1 as well. Bring out a Mystic Tomato here. And is Rainant going to let it go through? Yep, it is a TT of their own. Popping the Mystic Tomato there. So yeah. Okay, Spirit Reaper is here, so that game will go on. Whew. Good to see. So, there we go. We got all the players who signed up playing. MST on the back row there, and that was a Mirror Force, a very, very good MST there. Rayans is in a very good position, but it seems like they might not have any monsters. So, looks like they've got all spell traps. So that worked out pretty well for Danny Droid, as, if Rayans was able to just commit a monster field, hit in, then that would be pretty bad. So, the downside to Rain Dance, like MSTing the Mirror Force there, for Rain Dance is that, like, now Danny can set a potential other live back row, which would make it a bit tough for Rain Dance. But I get why they do that, especially if Rain Dance's back row is an important back row. They don't want it to get, like, MST'd in the end phase. So I think that makes sense. Danny's just going to set 1, set another, pass back. Could be like Magician of Faith. Could be like Serpent. There are a couple different things it could be, but Knock will deal with it no matter what it is. Whew. Oh, and it was another Fiber Jar. Okay, that's really, really good for Rain Dance there. If they do have a Fiber Jar in their deck, they will have to banish it. Looks like they do not, though. Could mean Fiber Jar's in hand. Could mean that they're not playing Fiber Jar at all. Either way, very interesting. And Elf will come down here to hit in directly for 19 if Danny does not have something here. The fact that they're thinking might mean that they might have like a Ring of Destruction. Could also mean that they've just got like, yep, they do have a Ring of Destruction here. Targeting the Elf, popping that. So both players do go down by 1900, but at least the Elf is gone, so Danny didn't have to worry about it next turn. I think that probably is the right play, especially if Danny doesn't really have any way to deal with it in their hand. Rain Dance committing to 2 back row here. Kind of risky into like Harpies, and there's the Harpies. But if Rain Dance has an IO, yep, there's the IO. Yeah, that's kind of rough here for Danny, as you really do want some powerful spells online. That being said, Rain Dance does have to pay 700 if they want to keep the IO up. So, maybe not the best situation for Rain Dance here either. And let's see. I'm getting pinged on Discord. So I wonder what that is. Oh, ruling issue. Okay, I'll check the ruling issue. Let me see. We can also dive into that game there, as that is Declan versus Vatos. So let's see. Ruling issue. I'm in the duel now. What's the issue exactly? If I activate Call of the Haunted now on Jinzo, that will go through. So you can do that. Because you can do that. It's not a damage step, so you can do that. You can chain it to Mirror Force and negate Mirror Force. Yeah, I assume that's what they're asking. So yeah. So looks like we're back in this game now. Sorry for the delay, or not delay, but you know, yeah. So yeah, call targeting Jinzo here will indeed negate a Mirror Force, that is activated. So yeah. But MST targeting the call will indeed stop the Jinzo from hitting the field. So Jinzo does not hit the field, the Mirror Force is not negated, and that will indeed Mirror Force the Reaper and the Serpent there. So, yeah, GXC says, man, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is complicated, and it really is. It's a tricky game even at this stage in it, right? You'd think DM would be sort of absent of a lot of rulings issues, but there are some things here that are a bit tricky, and that can be a bit tough for new players. But I do think that like the ruling issues that you encounter in DM really do help you for the ruling issues that you'd see later in the game. Like a lot of the ruling issues that you see in DM like appear in other forms throughout the game's history. And if you get the basics that a lot of DM formats provide, then it will help you out a lot in whatever formats you do play. So that's another reason to like try out these DM formats, as it is a bit tricky oftentimes, and these can help you get like a firmer understanding of the game. But looks like Declan is firing forceful here, sending back a Change of Heart. That's very, very good card there. Yeah, and a bit tricky here. So it looks like Vatos has got exiled and Raigeki. I think Vatos is probably in a more favored position here. There is so far up on cards. I mean, Declan does have Serpent coming back to hand every turn, but like, I mean, I don't know. Having exiled Raigeki is also really good. They've got Tomato as well. TT will come down here, popping the board, but Vatos has Solemn Judgment. Wow, that's pretty high impact Solemn Judgment, I'd say. Makes sense given the hand. And Declan's going to hit in here for 1,700. And that's pretty good. Honestly, Vatos is in a pretty decent position. They're going to set another, which might mean that they drew another monster in addition to exiled. Maybe like another Faith or something like that. Tough to say. But it looks like Serpent's going to come down here. Another TT hits the board. Bit of a high risk, high reward thing here. But it looks like that was indeed another Faith, so that will work out. Declan's going to set one there. And let's see what Vatos does. They could just summon out Exiled Force, hit in for 1,000. Looks like they're going to save that a bit. Unclear what their back row is, but we'll have to see about that. Serpent will return to Declan's hand here. A couple different options for them to do, so they're going to think about that a bit. They are just going to summon out Serpent, hit in. I mean, they are up on life points, and this does chip down at Vatos' total here. So, yeah, I think that makes sense. A bit iffy, though. There are things that Vatos can bring out here to clear the Serpent, and I feel fine about that. But this may force out like an Exiled Force from Vatos here. So, a bit tricky. But it is interesting. the number of cards is sort of evened out here, which is part of why Serpent's so strong. As Serpent just keeps giving you more cards, essentially, as long as you just keep using it. So, I think, like, Serpent can seem underwhelming at times, especially because there aren't as many, like, discard outlet cards. Like, Reiki Break isn't as popular, Tribe Infecting Virus, not in the format yet. But I do think that, like, Serpent still belongs in every Yata deck list, or at least most Yata deck lists. Exiled Force will hit over the Serpent, dealing 700 there. Main 2, Vatos is going to commit another back row, pass back to Declan here, and let's see what happens. Now, the fact that, so Serpent will come back, but it's kind of interesting because, like, Vatos kind of has an interesting choice next turn. If Declan doesn't clear the Exiled Force, then they might, like, set a monster to field. And if that's Serpent, like, it's obviously bad to Exiled Force it. But if it's not Serpent, it could be very high value to Exiled Force it. So, kind of tricky here. Vatos is going to MST the back row, hitting a TT, which is pretty good. And also explains why Declan was okay just bringing out the Serpent to, like, hit in for chip damage. Because TT would be able to stop whatever Vatos brought out to get rid of it. And now Vatos has a decision here. Will they Exiled Force the set? Or will they just, sort of hit over it? And it is a bit of a thinker. Declan did not set any more back row. Could be that they're playing around Harpy's Feather Duster, as that has not been used yet. Could be that they just don't have any more back row, and they actually have live monsters in hand. But it looks like if I just hit into the set, it was indeed the Sinister Serpent there. And so that worked out very, very well for them. So very, very cool play there. Very, very, like, skill-intensive play, just getting the read on your opponent. Like, is it Serpent? Is it not Serpent? Is it worth hitting in with the Exiled Force here, or is it worth using the effect? So very, very good read there on Vatos' part, and very intense. 3 TT in Grave. Yeah. I mean, that's one less thing for Vatos to worry about now. There are still very powerful traps like, Ring of Destruction, Aya. Whoa, Dark Hole on the Exiled. Wow. Not a typical play that you normally see. But when you got a Yata coming down, it does make sense. Now, Vatos does have a Ring of Destruction. It makes sense that they would have something to deal with a monster there, given that they were fine committing the Exiled Force into a potential monster that Declan might have. And Declan's going to set a card, keep Serpent in hand. So, very, very interesting game state here. Vatos is going Heavy Storm the back row, the pro heavy set. Very cool to see. They're just going to set another back row, pass back to Declan here. And Declan's going to bring out that Serpent, hit in for another bit of chip damage. Vatos is going to call the Haunt, and they do have a Tomato. Probably the highest impact target in their graveyard, I'd say. Given that, Declan is kind of down on cards, and Tomato can get in for damage. Declan doesn't necessarily want to hit into Tomato. So it looks like they're going to try and hit into the Serpent, but that will get Ring of Destruction here. And that is pretty rough for Vatos. They're at a very, very low life total. So every bit of life points does count. And they're just going to set one, pass back to Declan there. And let's see what happens. Very, very intense game here. Down to the wire. And a lot of Yata games do come down to the wire. That's part of why I love this format so much. There's just so many different points of interaction. And the games really do go on long because both players do have power cards. But because each player has power cards, they kind of equalize out. You don't often wind up in situations that you see in, like, for instance, GOAT. Like, a lot of people complain about the Trinity in GOAT. I think part of the reason that people complain in the Trinity is because, Pot Graceful Duo, they're just 3 cards in the deck. And so if one player draws one of those 3 cards, it feels like such a major sack because you've only got 3 of those cards in your deck too. So you're very much not necessarily guaranteed to draw them. But, in a format like Yata, people are drawing power cards left and right. If a person gets 1 power card, you're like, well, they got their power card. That's unfortunate, but I got 2 power cards in hand, So it's not necessarily as bad. Looks like each player's going to sort of wall up a little bit. And if we look at Vatos' graveyard, they are kind of running low on their powerful traps to protect themselves, which is kind of unfortunate when they're at 1,600 life points. So it makes sense why they're not potentially doing anything with this set right now. They don't want to necessarily play into if, like, Declan has a monster or not. But Very, very interesting game state. It can definitely go either way at this point. Like, Declan isn't at the highest life points either. They're at 4,000. So, it's a bit tricky for both players, I'd say. Question, of course, is what is Vatos' set? And there are a variety of things it could be. Like, at this point in the game, oh, Pot of Greed is insane here. Yeah, it's going to be really, really good in such a simplified game state. Pot is nuts. One of the craziest cards in this format for sure. And now the card advantage is kind of equalized. Although, as I mentioned earlier, if you've got ways to sort of use the Sinister Serpent and then get it back, you can definitely swing the card advantage one way or another. A lot of people call like Serpent like empty card advantage almost, kind of like a Thunder Dragon. But I do think that like since there are multiple ways to use it, more so than Thunder Dragon in my opinion, it's still a very, very good card. Okay, he's going to come down here, hit into a Fiber Jar. Wow, that's actually pretty good for Vatos here. However, it is also a little bit risky, as Declan will have the initiative here. They won't get to normal summon. The hotkey pops up when, after this finishes shuffling, it will give you a prompt. So, yeah, just, yep, it asks you after it's done, yeah. So, yep, and that waiting for position means that the hotkeys popped up for Declan. And, yeah, so everything will get shuffled back into the deck. Very, very intense. Now, this is a little bit risky because of things like Ring of Destruction, right? If Declan top decks Ring of Destruction off this Fiber Jar, gets it back, I mean, that is pretty good, and can definitely kill Vatos out of nowhere, depending on what they bring out. Yeah, GXG brings up a very good point. Thunder Dragon does not continuously soak damage. And also, there are no Chaos monsters here, so you can't necessarily, like, just load up your grave with light monsters like you would in something like Goat. So it's a bit less good. I mean, Graceful does exist, so, like, that's potentially a reason to play it. But with Serpent, like, that's generally good enough for a Graceful. And I think people generally just want to fill up their deck with more powerful cards than a card that deck thins. And goes well with Graceful. But it looks like Forceful is going to be opened from Declan, kind of rough. They're going to send back an MST, which might imply that... Oh, wow. Duo. Whew. Yeah, Ronnie McCutcheon, welcome. You come from Goat Format in peace. And as a note, I'm mainly bringing up Goat Format just to provide a common sort of frame of reference. Like, I really like Goat Format. I think it's a very, very good format. And I'm more just bringing it up because it's something that a lot of people know about. So I think that it's useful to sort of serve in sort of comparison. And I do think that a lot of Goat Format players would like Yata Format a lot. Like, I think the formats do have some similarities, and they both capture that sort of like nostalgic, like classic feeling of gameplay. They cannot normal summon. Declan can't normal summon here because they normal summoned the Kaiku. So let me, I'm going to try and message. Yeah, no, yeah, okay, it seems like they got the message. So yeah, they had normal summoned already because of the Kaiku. And, yeah, so Vatos can sort of do their turn over again because, if they wanted to. Yeah. So yeah, Ryan McCutcheon says, I played the format when it was current. Wow. Classic, player. It's been a while. I might play Yata again. I recommend it. There's been a lot of interesting sort of developments in this format. Like, people started experimenting with Gravekeepers Spy just like they have in Goat, and it actually had major success in the last Yata tournament. And people were also playing in that Gravekeepers Spy deck, they were playing like Gravekeepers Spear Soldier as well, and I think even Assailant. So Gravekeepers as a strategy has sort of seen some play in Yata. And there have been some like just interesting other things, like, Gearfried has seen some play with with Chain. A wide variety of decks have seen play, and there isn't anything like Chaos, which is like really centralizing. Because, like, when you've got the Chaos monsters in Goat, oh, yep, Call plus Ring will potentially do it. Yeah, and that will indeed be the end of the game. Wow, crazy game there. But I mean, that kind of is what Vatos had to do. Like, I think the duo play was the correct play here. Declan needed exactly a way to revive a monster plus Ring. Or I guess any monster off the top plus Ring would do it too. But they needed Ring. And if you had Ring, Vatos was probably dead here either way. So very good games there. Um, and yeah, so it looks like that is going to be that there. And I think I manual the losses here because you know, okay, that was already put in. Good. So now it's Aratos versus Declan there. Um, so yeah, that game will be going on. But yeah, don't worry about being a boomer. I'm also a bit of a boomer. I wasn't like playing competitively at the time Yata was around, but I was definitely playing on the playground when it was. So you know, um, I've been around in the game history for a while as well, and I just love this classic Yu-Gi-Oh gameplay here. But it looks like a very interesting game with Soul 65 and History of YGO1. We see a Air Knight Parashath, which is kind of an interesting card. You know, speaking of GOAT, this was a card that was very popular in GOAT at one point. People sort of moved away from it as the formats developed further, and things like Spy have, sort of become more popular. GOAT controls become less popular. So Parshath isn't necessarily as big as it once was in GOAT, but people are sort of like re-examining it here in Yata as a potential option. There are some like pretty good uses for it. There's an interesting light deck, like a light meta deck, that is just very very neat, and it's like I'm not sure if it's tier one or not. I've played with it. I think it's a lot better than a lot of people give it credit for. Um, but as Ryan McCutcheon says, if Spy's around, it makes it harder on Air Knight. So maybe this, maybe the sort of experimentation with Gravekeepers will prevent Air Knight from coming down in Yata as much as well. But it remains to be seen. There's still a lot of experimentation to be done in Yata, and a lot of the reason why people are playing Air Knight is also because Metamorphosis is out in this format, and going into Dark Balter off Air Knight is insanely good. Like, Dark Balter shuts down all the power spells in this format, and given that power spells are kind of this format's bread and butter, Dark Balter might just be worth going into, like, if you've got Parshath. Um, but people could play like Thunder Dragon for that instead. Like, there are other fives. It's just kind of an interesting sort of point of experimentation. And I think that, like, on the final stream for the last Yata tournament that was held, we sort of were talking about how, like, Yata format feels a lot like GOAT format did a while ago, where it's like a very sort of old DM era format, but there's still a lot of places to experiment. Like, the historical lists weren't necessarily the best, given modern experimentation, but people don't really know what the surefire, like, best decks in the modern version of the game are yet. So if you like GOAT, but you also want to have a format with a bit more room to experiment, I think that Yata is a perfect format for you. Vato says, enjoyed playing even if I couldn't pull it out. I'm entered in the AFL tourney, so hoping for a bounce back. Yeah, good luck in the AFL tourney. I'm going to be joining that as well after this locals wraps up. Ronnie McCutcheon says, Zambira has seen an increase on play recently on GOAT format. Zambira is legal here too, yes. And it is indeed legal. I think it has actually seen some experimentation in decks here, especially given, I mentioned Gearfried before. That deck mainly centralized around Gearfried and Blast with Chain, trying to use that for removal. But if you're playing Reinforcement in the army, Zambira is a warrior. And if Spy does, increase in popularity, I do see Zambira potentially seeing more play and experimentation. So I do think that that's definitely a card to look into, especially like looking at its success in GOAT. Again, like GOAT and Yata aren't 1-to-1, but I think you can definitely draw some lessons from there. And so definitely something to experiment with. But yeah, yeah, and as GXE mentioned, it's sometimes main in Gearfried or sided in other decks. So I mean, there's a lot of very, very cool options. And also, I've seen, like, another thing experimented with is Goblin Attack Force. I've seen that Warrior experimented with a bit. Get that also out Spy. It's not necessarily as good because it switches to defense, but if you've got, like, Traps to Protect it, it could potentially be decent. But yeah, Painful Choice coming down here, sending Comfy, Duo, Premat, and did that send Serpent as well? Kind of interesting that Soul didn't give Serpent then. Unless I missed something here. But in general, you just... I mean, I don't know. That's just how I play. In general, when Serpent gets sent, I just give them Serpent. Because, like, I mean, I guess the Reborn here could have brought back the Serpent. So, like... Or brought back the Jinzo. So, maybe Mr. White or Soul wanted to avoid that. But now History of Wagyu 1 can distribute the Jinzo. So I don't know how I feel about that. But Soul is going to think on the summon, probably out of fear of Jinzo coming down, honestly. It could also just be because Lesser Fiend is an annoying card to deal with here. Because like going into Sangam with Lesser Fiend is rough. But yeah, Lesser Fiend is going to hit into the Sangan. Will that go through? Nope, there is a Ring of Destruction here, targeting the Lesser Fiend there. So that will deal 2,100 damage to each player. And yeah, the Lesser Fiend will be popped there. What an intense game. Seems like History of Wagyu 1 is playing a bit more of a Fiend strategy. And, you know, Lesser Fiend was experimented with in the last Yata tourney, and it actually did pretty well. But yeah, speaking of Lost Arts, you know, History of Wagyu 1 has the Lost Art Reborn, the Lost Art Lesser Fiend. Again, as I mentioned, you know, growing up with the TCG arts, I generally tend more towards those. Because, like, I don't know. I don't know what's going on in the TCG art of Monster Reborn, but it's just become iconic to me. I know that the Ankh in the OCG art is, like, also iconic, and the Ankh is, like, the symbol of life, so it makes more sense. But, like, I don't know. I've just been captivated by the TCG version of the Monster Reborn art ever since, like, 2003. So, you know, that's a hard thing to sort of break after 20 years. But Mechanical Chaser is coming down. Kind of an interesting card here for Soul to be playing. Might make it more of like a machine reasoning deck, as like we've also seen some experimentation with like machine OTK limiters at 3 copies. If you're playing reasonings, then you know it'd work out like that. Yeah, Ring of Destruction also has the Lost Art here with the grenades instead of the fire. I actually, you know, this might be a controversial take. Neither player has the TCG Ring of Destruction art, but I think the fire on the Ring of Destruction art is cooler than the grenades. Like, I know that people are like, the fire, what's that? You know, the grenades are a clear threat, but like, I don't know, like the fire is just I don't know, it just hits different for me. Maybe it's just the orange coloring. Like I like, you know, bright colors. But I don't know, I just love the TCGR ring. MST coming down here, hitting an MST, which hits an IO, so that will negate the MSTs that come before it. But honestly, I think if you're History of Wagyu 1, you're not too upset with that trade. We know about the Jinzo in hand to come down and tribute over the tomato. The Serpent's still engraved, so maybe not adding the Serpent to hand was the right choice on Soul's part. But saying him, we'll get a search here. If Soul is playing like Exiled Force can pop the tomato there. So hitting that tomato. Yeah, tomato coming down. Vatos, I think I'm not sure if you were listening to the stream when you were in your game or not, but do you prefer the TCG or OCG art for tomato? I prefer the TCG art personally, but you know, I love the TCG art. It's just, for me, it's the teeth. I like the teeth and the tongue in the TCG art of it. But that's just me. I could definitely see that sort of putting some people off the TCG art. But Wang Yu coming down here is really, really good here. And you know, it's not the worst thing in the world for History of Wagyu 1 because they can bring out a witch here, which will get popped, get a search, get something to out the tomato, or out the Wang Yu, that is. But it is still kind of annoying because you neutralize the tomato threat. So yeah. And also History of Wagyu 1 does take 300 damage from that. The grenades will give someone World War I flashbacks. Yeah, I feel like given the meme going around with, like, you know, the soldier with 1,000-yard stare, maybe someone should do that with Ring. You know, just put Ring in the background of that guy. Fiber Jar, interesting pick here off the Witch. I don't necessarily hate it, honestly. Especially with IO up, you can prevent your opponent from actually being able to destroy it. But if you do keep the IO up, then you do have to go lower on life points than your opponent. So it's kind of an interesting thing. I mean, you do know about the Raigeki in hand. So, yeah, I think it's probably best just to, you know, set that. And they did not add back the Serpent. I think, honestly, it would have been better to add back the Serpent there. Then Soul doesn't necessarily know if you set the Serpent or the Fiber Jar. And honestly, if you wanted to, you could, like, save the Fiber Jar for later because, you know, just set a Serpent. You know, Soul probably isn't going to commit to another normal summon there. But yeah, Fiber Jar is going to come down. I think it's probably the best just to go for the Fiber Jar there anyways. But Yeah, Vato says, I like the TCG art. Oh, wait, actually, Ryan McCutcheon also says, TCG art looks human is weird to me. And I understand that. Like, I like the human look of it. It makes it more unnerving, and I like the unnerving nature of Tomato. But that's just me. Vato says, I like the TCG more typically, but the deck I copied for this event was using the OCG art. I've noticed something about, like, dueling book decks where, like, when you, like, for instance, net deck a deck from someone else and you, like, re-download it, I've noticed that, like, oftentimes it changes to the OCG art. I'm not sure if that's, like, a quirk of DB or if that's, like, the default artwork that they put in, and thus it goes to the default whenever you sort of, like, export it or import it or something. But yeah, I generally prefer the TCG art for all these cards, and so it's always, like, annoying for me when I grab a deck from another source because I'm like, okay, got to go in and change all the arts to TCG arts. Soul is going to fire a reasoning here. History Wedge 1's going to call for, and they hit Visor Shock, and this is part of why I'm not the biggest fan of Visor Shock. Like, you know, I don't know. This card just seems so underwhelming in a lot of cases. But I mean, I guess Soul's got another reasoning, so, you know, might as well go for another one. And that one does actually hit the 4 there. But Pot of Greed here coming down. So, kind of interesting ordering. I wonder if it was, I mean, I guess it's probably best to go for the reasonings first before the pot. Because you don't want to draw into something like, you know, your level 7s, for instance. But also, like, reasoning could potentially mill some powerful, you know, oh, okay, tributing the Bioshock for a Parshath, pretty good. Firing Last Will here as well. Last Will does use its original effect in Yata format, so, you know, you don't have to do it before you tribute, although here it wouldn't actually really matter that much. But also pretty good board here. Yeah, Vata says DB devs like the OCG art confirmed. Yeah. I mean, I don't blame them. OCG art is iconic. OCG Don Zaluk is the GOAT. Yeah, Don Zaluk is probably the, like, one OCG art where I'm like, okay, you know, this art probably the better art here. Because, like, I don't know, the knives are cool, but, like, just the looks of those guns, like, and I mean, I don't know if this is gonna get me. I mean, I'm not monetized really here either way, but, like, I don't know if I should necessarily be talking about, like, you know, the exact coolness of those guns or something. But I think the look of the card is very, very cool. Yeah, GXG says cries and Fiend Comedian. Honestly, I find the OCG art for Fiend Comedian more disturbing than the TCG art. But that's just me personally. So yeah. Oh, and Duo coming down there. Ooh, brutal turn for Soul. Honestly, oh, I'm not really sure how you come back from that. But oh, it looks like History of 1 doesn't really have much to capitalize on that with. Or I mean, they could potentially have, like, I don't know, Magician of Faith to grab back a card, but that also means that they probably don't have an aggressive card in hand as well. So it looks like Soul is just going to pass back to History of 1. Maybe they drew a brick, given they are playing Reasoning. You know, they are playing Tribute Monsters in their deck. So kind of unfortunate to see. History of 1 might just win the game this turn, depending on what they got. Although, you know, given they didn't bring out a monster to attack last turn, they might not have the most aggressive pressure here. They do indeed have the Faith. So the question is what Faith is going to add back. Now, you could just add back the Duo to snipe whatever card Soul has in hand, but I do think the Raigeki is probably the better choice here. Jinzo coming down, hitting in for 2,400. And that's pretty formidable. Now, there are some things that potentially give History of 1 some trouble here. If Soul has, like, Snatch Steal or Change of Heart, neither of which have been milled off Reasoning, and History of 1 doesn't have a way to stop that, then that will indeed be the end of the game for History of 1 here. Okay, that's honestly not that bad. I mean, Raigeki does come down and kill the set, but that set card could be, like, you know, Book of Moon. It could be something. I mean, I don't know. Not really much chance of Soul winning there, but yeah, that is indeed the end of the game. So very, very good games there. What's the reason for the different art? Lad Russo asks. And the reason, I think, is generally just censorship. Yeah. I think, like, I can't really think of one where I'm just like, yeah, there's no reason why this would happen. A lot of the time it's like crosses as well, which isn't something that you necessarily think would be censored in a lot of cases. But I mean, I don't know. They wanted to avoid the satanic panic, I guess. But yeah, it could be fan service as well. Like the Harpy ladies got censored, and honestly, looking at the OCG art, probably for good reason. Um, I think that's the main thing. I think there were some cards where like they just completely changed it to a different. I guess for Tomato, yeah, I don't know why they changed it. Um, because like the original art of Tomato like looks fine, right? Um, I guess one thing could be that like I think maybe there were some issues with like copyrights where like if you like if that art of Tomato is what appeared in like the anime or manga, there might have been some weird thing there. Yeah, search comes after. Search comes after. Um I will message I mean I'll message either of them. Search after. Yeah. I'll also message GMYFS. Yeah, okay, there we go. Yep, because the damage happens before the witch is sent to grave. So, yeah. Fixed bracket. Okay, so History of YG1 did win there, so I'll just put that in. Boop. Submit score. There we go. And there you go, History of YG1. All fixed. Hopefully. I mean, there might be other fixes. Anything else? Oh, I need to also make food go forward. There we go. Anything else? I don't see anything else, but I don't know. I could be wrong. Let me know down below. Oh, that's brutal. Whoa. What? Harvey's Feather Duster basically, I mean, basically, Ragged Dragon is getting no value out of that Harpies because what happens here is Call brings back Witch get popped. GM YFS gets a search off that. Blast gets popped the Donzalug. Dust Tornado gets chained, pops Ragged Dragon's other back row. Oh my goodness, that is wild. Wow. I mean, that's a rare sight in this format, but it can indeed happen, especially if you are playing Blast with Chain. And it I mean, Blast with Chain is a very interesting card in this format, partially because of that. Like people are playing a lot of spell and trap removal. So like you can sort of play into that. Like, you know, if you're worried about heavy or harpies, Blast with Chain can definitely make that go down a little bit easier. I mean, Rider Drag does have the Forceful Sentry here, so they are able to send back a Reborn. And honestly, hitting Tomato into a Zalug, bring out potentially another Zalug, but it looks like they do not do that, so maybe they're only on the one Zalug here. Oh, they're gonna. I mean, I hope they're not listening, and then I hope they're not listening, and then did that. Like, yeah, no, please don't take my you know, words here as you know, things to do. I don't think they're listening because I did have to message them here for the rulings. But yeah. Anyways, I mean, that's one of the downsides to doing locals and talking about this. But yeah, so Reaper did hit Lily, which is honestly, I mean, if you're Riot Drag, that's kind of an interesting one. Like Exiles does pop the Spirit Reaper, but like Inject and Fairly gets in for like 3,100 over Spirit Reaper. So, you know, you might be a bit worried about that, but you probably would have preferred sending the Exiled there instead because you can always switch Reaper to defense. Yata comes down, might just be the end of the game, honestly. Depends on what else GMYFS drew there. But I mean, probably a monster. Yeah, the Gemini Elf just hitting in for 19. Now, there's an argument potentially GM YFS should have just set the Elf to get the draw, and you know, in case Riot Drago has like Snatch Steal or something. But realistically, you're only really playing around Snatch Steal. No one plays Fisher this format. So yeah, realistically, it's just Snatch Steal that punishes you there. So I think it was probably the right thing to do. As you kind of also do need to dig yourself out of the hole that you've sort of fallen into in terms of card advantage. But Gemini Elf hitting over the Serpent, and then Zalug trying to hit in, but a Call of the Haunted coming down here. Bring back Twin-Headed Behemoth, kind of an interesting choice. Maybe the Tomato would have been better, just to sort of clear the Zalug, get more value off of it. But, I mean, I don't hate the Twin-Head Behemoth. I'm not sure if the Behemoth has activated its effect yet this game. But if it has activated its effect yet this game, then that's kind of unfortunate for Raga Draga here. If it hasn't, maybe they have a tribute monster in hand and they just want to like tribute over it or something. Looks like they do indeed have that. So then the Twin Head will come back, get more value. And Sangan and Witcher engraved, so you couldn't quite do that with Tomato. But we might get to see why Twin Head maybe is on the limited list. Actually, that's not true. Twin Head's on the limited list because it's weird once per duel interactions with like Fiber Jar. And it makes for a rulings nightmare. So, you know, you gotta have it limited to one copy. So that way you don't have like multiple copies in the deck, unsure of like which one is which one's used its effect, which one hasn't. So yeah. But, you know, it's still a decent card. Gets you some advantage coming back. But yeah, still a pretty tough spot for GMYFS. Jinza plus Yata here is very unfortunate. Now, GMYFS could have like book, but looks like they do not. So that will indeed be the end of the game. But wow, what a game. That was really, really intense. We saw some great plays on both duels parts. Really, really intense. Awesome stuff. That Harpies play was just like, oh, chef's kiss. Like, only in a format like this, you get plays like that. And it also does show, like, you know, people do complain about, like, heavier or Harpies, but, like, you can play around those. There are a lot of cards in these formats that can either be chained to those or that still get you value even after getting hit by them. And so it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world to get hit by that. So very, very cool game one there. While they're siding, let's dive into another game here. Keep the action going. Keep seeing what's going on here. We got Dump Truck versus History of YGL1 here. And it looks like a Spirit Reaper just hit into a Magician of Faith. Adding back Harpies, I mean, probably the best option there for History of YGL1, honestly. But that duo is going to come down, rip 2 cards out of hand. Kind of unfortunate. Justice Punch says, I've always wondered how the game could go if we did get to reset from 0 with card and pack design after Konami learned from all their mistakes that they made, like adding hard ones per turns. Yeah, I think it's a very, very interesting hypothetical, Justice Punch. And it would be something like, it would be an interesting sort of alt format. Like, if you just gave every card a hard once per turn and just ran with it that way, it would be kind of interesting. Like, I think a lot of the looping of these sorts of cards doesn't come until, like, later. I mean, like, once Night Assailant gets introduced, I think that's when the most looping that I can think of really happens. I guess you can loop Sangan and Witch a little bit, but I feel like a lot of the time in the DM era, like, the hard ones per turns aren't necessarily the biggest deals. That becomes more of an issue later when cards become more, like, loopable. But it would be an interesting sort of experiment to see how much would change. MST on the back where they're hitting another MST. Honestly, it might have been better just to save the MST there for the Harpies coming down. But, oh, the normal summon Fiber Jar hitting in to Faith here, ripping a card out of hand. I think that probably is the correct play, as weird as it may seem. You just want to get ripping with Reaper. And, you know, you'll take whatever you can do to actually accomplish that. They rip a Dark Hole out of hand, which is really good for Dump Truck, as they do know the other card in hand is Harpies. So they can sort of just keep playing around that. History Wide One, yep, they are going to fire the Harpies here. Hit an MST, you know, probably if you're Dump Truck, you're fine with that. And that explains why Dump Truck was okay just blind MSTing their set, because, like, you know, it worked out. Mr. Tomato is going to hit into the Fiber Jar there, clearing that. Fiber Jar is a very powerful card, but Dump Truck is kind of up on cards here. So I think it made sense that they went for this play. But yeah, let's see what Dump Truck does here. They're just going to switch Reaper to defense, set another, pass back. Honestly, pretty fine. Janjo Jones says, rippin' with Reaper is my favorite t-shirt slogan. Yeah, someone should put that on a shirt, rippin' with Reaper. Is there anything we can do with Zalug? Zippin' with Zalug? Destroying with the Dawn? Or discarding with the Dawn? That's a decent one. But yeah, if someone wants to put that on a shirt, that would be pretty funny. But welcome to the stream, Janjo. Pleasure to have you here as always. And let's see what happens with History of it's Dump Truck's turn. Kind of curious what the set is. it is a faith, so they will be able to get a search or card from their graveyard here. Now the question is, do you like clear the tomato with like a Raigeki or something, and just get in for chip damage? Yep, it looks like they are indeed going to bring back the Raigeki, use the Raigeki right away, clear the tomato there. It's not as potentially high value as you might think, because no cards in hand means that, Reaper isn't necessarily as valuable, but not the worst thing in the world. Dump Truck isn't even going to switch the Reaper to attack. I think that makes a lot of sense, because there's nothing to rip, so, no real point to hitting in there. It looks like History of Ydra 1's just going to pass back to Dump Truck. Now, this could potentially be baiting the Reaper to attack in, but honestly, I feel like it's probably still fine. MST comes down, hitting the set. It's just a trap hole, and this is going to be pretty good for Dump Truck here, and Zalug on top of it. So, Zalug hitting in for 1400. Dump Truck switching their monster to defense, being like, this doesn't really change the clock too much, and I don't want to be vulnerable here. Metamorphosis in hand, kind of interesting. I guess not really as valuable if you're low on cards, but I feel like it probably would have still been good to just preserve on field. Reborn, bring back a tomato. That's really good for History of Ydra 1 here. Tomato can crash into Zalug, bring out another monster, and this is pretty good for History of Ydra 1 here. I mean, they've got a lot of powerful monsters that they can bring out. They can bring out another tomato, bring out a Sangan, a Witch. The awkward thing about Witch or Sangan is Dump Truck has a way to clear it. Then that means that they'll be able to rip whatever card History of Ydra 1 adds to hand. But they could always just add a Serpent. So, not the worst thing in the world, I guess. It looks like they've got... Oh, okay. So that's not an immediate clear on the Witch, but I mean, Mirage is still pretty good here. Unfortunately, Dump Truck has used up all 3 of their MSTs here. So they don't necessarily have a way to clear it. Kind of interesting, but I mean, the set could potentially be something like IO, in which case that would indeed clear it. So there goes the 3 draws, and we'll have to see if Dump Truck discards 3 cards as well next turn. Air Knight Parashath coming down over the Witch of the Black Forest. That actually is probably the best thing History of Ydra 1 could have gotten there. This allows them to get a search off of the Witch, get a card off the Parshath if the set is not something that deals with Parshath here, and just like that, the game might have turned around a bit. We'll have to see what happens here and what Dump Truck set is. But I think if you're like History of Ydra 1, you have the read that the set is like IO. And so you just feel free to attack in. I'll have to actually see what happens here now. Main 2. What is History of Ydra 1 going to do? They're just going to pass back to Dump Truck here. Dump Truck draws, and in the standby phase, they will indeed have to discard. So set probably isn't IO then. Makes me wonder what the set is. But this is actually a really tough spot for Dump Truck to be in, because Parshath puts a clock on them here, but also Mirage puts a clock on them here, because they can't actually out it, really, unless they draw IO. And, yeah, this is very tricky. Hitting a Yata, honestly, those are the 3 best cards that could have been hit there for Dump Truck. None of those are really doing anything on this board. The Serpent that History of Ydra 1 has outs the Yata lock. And so, yeah, this is... I think if you're History of Ydra 1, or if you're Dump Truck, that is, you're ultimately fine with that. Dump Truck will indeed draw 3 more cards off the Mirage there. Let's hope they had an IO in their previous hand, or else that Mirage is going to be discarding a bit more on their next turn. Kind of a tricky choice for History of Ydra 1 here. Do you hit into the Reaper, or do you hit into the set? Reaper's guaranteed damage, but the set could be something that you want to hit. Okay, Ring does come down here on the Parshath, popping that, dealing 1900 to both players, and depriving History of Ydra 1 of the draw. So pretty good Ring there. And we'll have to see what happens. Declan lost to Aratos. Oh, did Ghost and Danny wrap up? Okay, Ghost beat Danny. Okay, cool. So I'll put in that. And it says Declan lost to Aratos. So Aratos is going forward. So we've also got one of our sort of finalists here. Or semifinalists, that is. But, yep, no IO, it seems, on that. So kind of unfortunate for Dump Truck, but Dump Truck does have the Serpent, so they are able to get that back. They do lose Pot and Graceful, though, so that, honestly, kind of unfortunate. Jinzo does come down here, though, so could potentially be close to the end of the game, depending on what Dump Truck's set is. Change of Heart on the set, so they could be going for lethal here. I mean, that's probably a Serpent set, but Tomato, yeah, Tomato just does it, so that will indeed be the end of the game here, unless History Wide 1's playing like Scapegoat, which we do see a Scapegoat in Grave, so potentially, this could potentially go on to another turn, but we'll have to see. Do they have Scapegoat? They're going to take that 300. Are they taking this 1400? Looks like the Scapegoat's going to come down there, so it seems like they wanted to preserve 2 tokens here. Now, Dump Truck could also just like lock their field with this, just pass back the Serpent at the end of turn. But Raigeki's already gone, so not necessarily a reason to do that. So it's probably better just to keep attacking in. So yeah, it looks like they will indeed do that. I think it's probably the wise choice. Now, that clock that I mentioned with Mirage is really coming up here. So, I mean, Jinzo locks IOs. So that means that, even if they draw IO, they're not necessarily going to be able to clear Mirage. So if History of Wide 1 can stall for a couple more turns, this could potentially be really bad for Dump Truck. Now, Dump Truck does have ways to alleviate this. If they don't play anything next turn, and they just keep their cards in hand. Forceful sending back something here could be pretty bad for Dump Truck here. But let's see what History of Wide 1 sends back there. A lot of potential options here. But, not seeing the hand, we don't necessarily know the options. Red Eye Solaris says, sadly, the machines got out early. But cool to see you repping that deck. I'm not sure it's necessarily tier 1, but it's still very, very cool. And a cool rogue option. So I hope people continue to experiment with it. Looks like they're going to send back a Snatch Steal there. Kind of interesting. I feel like, honestly, sending back the Serpent would have probably been best, as if you're Dump Truck, you want to have the Serpent in hand as a discard off Mirage. That then, gets you back a card. So that way you can sort of deplete the clock on Mirage. But, I mean, I don't know. It's not a bad option because Snatch Steal can be annoying. But, I don't know. I feel like Snatch Steal was the least good card in this game state. But, now Dump Truck will have to discard 3 cards from hand. So they're just going to say pick one to keep. And, yeah, it looks like they're going to pitch a Tomato, a Lily, and a Serpent. So they will get back the Serpent indeed. And we do know that the last card is a Witch there. So, yeah, now Dump Truck can just clear the entire field here. So, yeah, Witch coming in, hitting into their sets. And that will indeed go through. So, very, very risky situation for History of Wide 1. If they've got another Scapegoat, then that's really, really good for them. But they kind of need that. If they've got removal, that will also work. So, if they've got, the Raigeki, then that would also help. Especially given that we've seen a lot of what Dump Truck has sort of gone through here. It looks like Mirage will go off without a hitch here. Drawing 3. And let's see... When's this going to go through? Someone draw 3. Is it lagging or is it... Okay, it's just not clear whether it was confirmed or not. Okay, so there are the 3 draws. And, again, Dump Truck deck is getting pretty low. But, yep, and History Wide 1 will add back that Serpent there. Serpent getting continued value as a blocker. Setting that, passing back, and... I mean, I think if you're Dump Truck here, you're feeling pretty good about this, no matter what gets discarded here. So this will be 3 to discard, losing a Sangan, a Tomato, and you want that last one to be the Serpent, but was not the Serpent. But honestly, not the worst thing in the world. Now, there's kind of an interesting choice here. The question is, do you hit him with Jinzo first, and then potentially come into the monster board to get him for 25? Or do you just hit in with, Tomato? Uh, but it looks like History Watcher 1's going to say something here in the chat. I mean, yeah, so Fiber Jar was a potential option here to get History Watcher 1 out of it as well. But note the Dump Truck is not actually summoned this turn. So this actually will potentially, they'll be able to commit a monster to the board. They'll have the initiative here. So not the worst thing in the world for Dump Truck, but definitely a very, very interesting game. You shut off the Mirage timer as well, which is good. But I mean, that was really the only option there for History Wide 1 to do if they wanted to survive. So very, very interesting sort of game state here. And honestly, like, a lot of people think the Fiber Jar is a very degenerate card. I actually think it's very interesting in terms of game design. And I think it's also like, it can lead to some very fascinating situations. And it can definitely be a very, very good comeback card that isn't quite like the most broken comeback card in the world, right? Like, there are plenty of things that Dump Truck can do with the initiative here to give History of Wajio 1 a really tough time. Although they are down on life points. So, that will come up again. I mentioned earlier in the stream that Fiber Jar resets everything except for the damage. And the damage is, pretty important in a format like this. Things like Ring exist. There are a lot of things that can happen here that would be pretty bad for Dump Truck. So it's still anyone's game at this point. But we'll have to see what Dump Truck does. Pot of Greed is very, very good to draw there in the opener. And let's see, do they have any hand rips? If you got a hand rip, it's kind of actually interesting because, like, do you fire Comfy or Duo here? You're dropping down to 1100. It might be kind of risky to do. But, yeah, it seems like it's just going to be a T-set and pass here. And it's going to go over to History of YGO1. So T-set pass, the classic, the meme, but it is a very formidable play. Could be a Faith set to get back the pot. I mean, that would be pretty, pretty good on Dump Truck's part. And it looks like History of YGO1 is going to reciprocate with, they're going to add another. They're going to make it an L set and pass. So potentially pretty good there. Rai Solar says, Fiber Jar, in the context of where DM was at, makes sense why the card was made. At least with it being a solution before cards were banned. Yeah. I think that, in the DM formats where it's legal, Fiber Jar generally isn't the most degenerate thing. There are definitely more degenerate combos that can exist. So I personally like the card. I understand why a lot of people don't like it, but I think it actually adds a very interesting aspect to the gameplay. Dump Truck gonna flip up a Sangan here, attack in for 1,000. Kind of rough to exile a Sangan there, but you do have the Forceful, so that makes sense why they did it, I guess. Going for one of the cards in hand. Now you could send back the Serpent, as the Serpent, gives Blast sort of a constant blocker, but it really does depend on the hand. There are a lot of things that could be very problematic for Dump Truck here, but we'll just have to see what they choose. They're going to send back a Premature Burial. Kind of an interesting choice. Might mean that there's kind of like a low-powered hand there, because I feel like you're not generally too worried about pre-mat on a Sangan, right? Like if your opponent pre-mats a Sangan, right, and you've got a Sangan on your side of the field, like, it's not the worst thing in the world. Might mean that they've got a Tribute monster in hand, because, like, Dump Truck doesn't want them to, like, pre-mat the Sangan, Tribute over it for, like, a Parchath and get in. That would make sense to me. But, kind of an interesting choice there. But Mirage coming down here. Now, unlike last game, Dump Truck is at a much higher deck count, and also they potentially have an MST. But it looks like they do indeed have the MST for the Mirage there, and that will indeed go through. So Mirage will get popped, and Dump Truck will gain all the value off it. Knock on the set. Really, really good there, if that was a Serpent, and it is indeed the Serpent. Now the question is, do you commit more? And it looks like Dump Truck is committing more into this. TT could be on the board. Also, Mirror Force could be on the board. But either way, if those monsters get popped, you're not really as concerned because, you get a search off them. Scapegoat coming down here. That will indeed go through. It looks like no IO on Dump Truck's part. And that will clear 2 tokens probably. Yeah, because, there's not really a reason to lock your opponent's zones at this point in the game. You just want to get in for damage. So, looks like that's going to happen there. MST on the remaining back row. The blind MST going for Ring on the Witch. depleting both players' life points a little bit. Kind of a scary place to be in, because now a ring here on a lot of things that History Wide 1 might bring out is kind of dangerous. But honestly, Dump Truck getting the search here is kind of good for them. Like, a lot of good things they could search and potentially take control of the game again. Yeah, they're going to search out a Faith. Kind of an interesting choice there. But there are some very powerful spells in Grave to get back. Might mean that they don't really have many more aggressive beaters in deck. But I don't know, kind of interesting. Metamorphosis coming down here for Thousand Eyes, and this might just be the end of the game, depending on what Dump Truck's got in the back row. Ringing the Thousand Eyes before it sucked up the Sangan is a very, very good play there. So, yeah, neither player will take damage, but you're saving yourself from losing. So, looks like History Wide 1's going to set to pass back to Dump Truck there. Also, one thing that the Ring the Thousand Eyes does is it prevents, like, a Tribute monster from coming down if that is what occurred. Graceful getting fired here. That is a very, very good card. Can potentially get Dump Truck out of whatever situation they're in. Looks like we have another member of the Discord here. Food, welcome to the stream. Looks like GMYFS did lose to Food there. So I'm going to put that in. Okay, that got put in anyways. Yeah. So, you know, if GMYFS doesn't want that to be, you know, a rated match, or if you two didn't agree to it being a rated match, it doesn't have to be. But I can figure that out after the tournament wraps up. So, Graceful pitching a Tomato and a Fiber Jar. Looks like Dump Truck's going to just switch the Sangan defense, set another monster there, likely the Faith. And it looks like a Fiber Jar is going to get flipped up here. That is very unfortunate for Dump Truck. A lot of things kill Dump Truck here. History Wide 1 just needs any basically draw off the top that's 1,000 or more attack, and they will indeed win. This is the first game of the match, though, so, you know, it's been a long first game, but it has been the first game of the match, which is wild to think about, but that is, you know, potentially how it goes. Dump Truck saying, show me a monster. Can't. Okay, so it seems like Dump Truck might still be alive here. So very, very interesting sort of game, because, you know, this would have likely been the end of the game for Dump Truck in a lot of situations. But if History Wide 1 doesn't have a monster that they can do, then Painful will probably get them to a monster. As long as they have 5 or more monsters with, like, well, Jinzo won't be one of them, but I mean, they might have a Reborn here. Yeah, they probably just have Reborn. But yeah, you just have to give your opponent like Jinzo or Parshath. But I mean, they've got Sangan and Witch, so they've got to have Reborn here, right? Like, if they don't have Reborn here, this is like one of the biggest throws I've seen. Yeah, they've got Reborn. And that will indeed be the end of game 1. So very, very intense game 1. Very, very cool stuff from both players there. Very interesting. But anyways, we are going to, while they side, we're going to go into another match and see more of what's going on in this locals here. We got a Ratos versus Rain Dance here. Looks like it's 1-1. Ooh, very interesting. Going to game 3. And we did see that Rain Dance was on a bit of an interesting deck, more of a hand control strategy. I mean, not to say that History Wide 1 and Dump Truck are not also on very interesting decks. That they are. We saw that there was a bit of a meta deck on History Wide 1's part, which is kind of cool. Very, very cool to see so much experimentation in this locals. I hope that we see this level of experimentation in the tournament starting tomorrow. If you want to join in on that tournament, then head on over to the Format Library. Link in the description of this video. And, you know, you can join that tournament, get in on the action, get playing Yata. Very, very fun format. And also, if you want to join any of the locals that we hold, that will be on the YGO from Zero Discord, which is also linked in the description. So, plenty of places to play these retro formats. And also, if you're watching the stream and haven't given a like already, definitely like that video. Subscribe if you're not already. We're close to 1,000. And let's dive into these games. So, it looks like Rain Dance does have a drop-off here. So, that will indeed, you know, clear whatever Aratos drew there. And hitting a Sangan is honestly pretty good. Oh, and a Dust Shoot on top of that. Wow. Just ripping apart the hand here. I think can you fire? Dust Shoot in draw. I think you can, but I think effectively it doesn't necessarily matter. But yeah, it looks like Randon's gonna think here a bit. Yeah, Red Solaris, smash that like button. You know, leave a comment in the chat, or if you're watching this after, you know, just on the video. And yeah. Oh, Pot of Greed will recover some lost cards there, which is kind of unfortunate for Rain Dance. One of the flaws of Dust Shoot is it doesn't hit things like Pot. But yeah, it looks like Eraser's just gonna set 2 pass. Might be the Witch set, given that we do know about the Witch in hand. Knock, though, comes down for the set, and that is going to clear the Faith. Okay, wow. So now both players have to get rid of any Faiths in their deck, or shuffle up the deck, you know, otherwise. The shuffling part doesn't really matter the most. Like some people really care about it, but I mean, honestly, it's probably like unless the ordering at the top of the deck actually is known in some capacity or is stacked in some capacity, the shuffling doesn't really matter. Red Eye Solar says, Dust Shoot my Yata format. And yeah, we're seeing some experimentation with Dust Shoot here. Very, very cool to see that experimentation, I think, especially given how powerful a card Dust Shoot will be in later Yu-Gi-Oh! Formats. Gemini Elf coming down here, hitting into Rain Dance's Gemini Elf. I think that was the correct play, as Razors does have a Witch as well, to get them another monster. So Rain Dance going to be potentially in a tough spot if they don't have more monsters here. Now, if they have like a Spirit Reaper or a Zalug, that could be pretty bad for Ratos here. They're just going to set one into the MST, but that is just an MST of their own. So, you know, trades pretty favorably there. Yata coming down, though, that could potentially be the end of the game. The Yata lock. Yata hitting in Yata format against the player with a Yata profile. Pretty funny to see. But yeah, this might just be it. The set maybe like an MST, for instance, here. But I mean, you can potentially bait the MST, like setting one, and then I mean, it's kind of tricky because the MST can snipe any traps that you might have, like Range Destruction. But yeah, it looks like they're going to go for an MST on that MST preemptively, setting a card which will likely be a trap, I assume. Or just summoning out the Exiled, hitting in for 1,000. I mean, which can clear Exiled. But the thing here is that if Erasus brings out Witch, then they can also bring out Yata. So, you know, this will stop the lock potentially. Forceful being fired here, clearing the Raigeki there. And this might just go to a top deck war unless Ratos has something to clear Exiled here. Witch hitting into Exiled Force. So, Rainant will be able to draw. And so they're still in it. They're in a really, really tough spot, but they are still in it. It all comes down to this last draw, really. James Zone says, Yata no, Yata yes. Indeed, we are in Yata format, so let's get those Yatas out there. Yataing in. Yataing all over the place. Rainage will set one, which could potentially stop a Yata coming down here. Yata coming down, hitting in. Solemn Judgment on the Yata, though. That is probably one of the best things they could have gotten. Their life points are very, very low. But yeah, so that will deplete their life points further, but like, you got to do that. Yata's out of rotation now. You don't need to worry about it. The issue is that Rain Dance is playing a fair number of bricks, like the drop-offs, the dust shoots, things like that. Those don't really help them right now. So if they draw those and they need a monster instead, it's going to be really, really rough for them. And it's part of why like these sort of all-in hand control strategies are not really as popular in Yata as you might expect. I mean, historically, people were playing things like drop-off in addition to the other hand rips. But, you know, with further testing, the drop-offs and things really do brick up you like more than they help you. So people have sort of streamlined their decks a little bit and not gone for that sort of strat. But which going to attack in here, 411, dropping Rain Dance down to 1650. And Rages will set one as well, and is not looking good. It can't be a Moth because the Nobleman earlier, but still, there are plenty of things that can make Rain Dance in for a pretty tough time there. Rain Dance going to set another card there. Pass back to Ratos. Not looking good. Jar agreed to draw one more, potentially draw into the lethal line there. Let's see what happens. they're going to tribute Over the Witch for a Jinzo. That likely will be the end of the game here, unless Rain Dance has like Scapegoat or Book. But yeah, that will be the end of the game. So very, very intense game here. Aya was set as well as a Comfy, so nothing that could really stop an aggressive push. But yeah, that was once the Jinjo hit the field, nothing that you could do about that. But wow, what an intense game there. We see some interesting tech from Aratos here with the Bazoo. So it's almost like Android format. You got Bazoo, you got Elf, and then there's the Spy that I mentioned earlier that was seeing some experimentation. But I believe then that just means that I think it's just the game between. Oh no, because there's a food thing. Oh, it went to 4 games. Food. Wow, that's wild. Yeah, another draw. We've seen a couple draws recently on like stream and stuff, on stream and in videos. Looks like Dumfrick is in a really, really tough spot here. Dark Hole will clear that up a little bit. History Wide 1 does get a search off the Sangan, but Dumfrick sort of regained the initiative from this, so we'll have to see what they do with it. Red Solaris says, is Aratos going to keep on winning? That's the question. Like Aratos is a very, very good duelist in all these DM era formats and in other formats as well. But through the context of this channel, we just know from the DM stuff. But so I could definitely see them potentially winning the whole locals here. Jinju getting brought back and a Comfy being fired. This is a very, very good push from Dump here. You get to shut down the back row, get something like Io or something. And you also get to see what the opponent's got, stop stuff from there. The Aratos and Ghost game is wrapped up, so let's put Aratos in as the winner there. So now we've got one of our finalists. We've got Aratos in the finals. Now all we need is Dump in history, and then food, and whoever wins that. Adrian Brunner says, does Bazoo work the same as an Android, or is the text already updated in this format? Yeah, the text is updated in this format because this is actually, Yata's kind of an interesting point in the game's history because technically the format comes from Worlds format from 2003. So it does go by the OCG rules in general. So Bazoo, Kaiku, Skull Lair, they all work like they do in the OCG, which means that you can only banish monsters from your grave to use their effects. And then like immediately after Yata format in the immediately after the World's Championship in the TCG, Yata basically they changed the text to actually match the OCG there. But welcome Cole to the stream. Have you been watching any of the stuff that's been happening here? Because we've had some crazy games so far.
I'm just back from the gym, and I thought, no way, this would be still going on 90 minutes later, and I'm happy to be able to help cast the greatest format of this channel's history.
Honestly, I agree. I love Yata. I think Yata, listen, there's something to like about every format that I've covered, and there's something to love about a variety of the formats that I've covered. Like, for instance, I may say that Yata is my favorite format that I've covered, but that doesn't mean that I don't enjoy, like, Yugi Kaiba, Critter, like, everything else that I've covered. There's always something to enjoy. But, like, I feel like Yata is the format that just, I don't know, it feels so good to play. There's just enough options that, like, you have a variety of things to play around, and you have to constantly be thinking about all those various things. There's enough variety in the card pool as well to lead to interesting deck building choices. And there aren't really as many centralizing strategies as there are in other formats. Like, for instance, I was mentioning earlier with GOAT format, there's like chaos stuff that sort of rises to the top. And so people are playing chaos stuff. And that centralizes the format quite a bit. I mean, there are decks like Warriors and Burn and things like that. But those sort of play very differently. But
would you have gone after the Tomato or the Jinzo there?
I think the Tomato is the right choice there because you want to clear that while Hades is on the field, and you figure like Dump might not have anything to actually deal with the Hades. But it is a bit of a risk because if Dump does have a removal spell, then Jinzo is still on field, your traps are still shut off, and it's a bit tough. But I mean, it also
I think I was gonna say when you have the strongest monster on the field, Jinzo's kind of working for you. He doesn't have to worry about any removal traps hitting his Hades.
Yeah.
Which is actually History of Yu-Gi-Oh's Jinzo. I'm late to the party on that.
Yeah, no, that was Dump Reborned it. But History of Yu-Gi-Oh! 1 has reclaimed the advantage here. And Hades is a very annoying card, especially if you're trying to come back as Dump Truck. Now, if Dump Truck has a trap to get back into this, then, that can definitely help, especially now that Jinja's gone. But there could potentially be things that History Waja 1 can do here.
Ooh.
Knock. Oof. That is rough. And yeah,
Reaper would have been great there.
Yep, because that's like the one monster, like the one defensive monster at least that Hades does not get over. Blind MST in gear is kind of interesting. Oh well, if they've got 3 MSTs, then
less blind now.
Yeah, and you can't fire the ring because that loses you the game there. But they hit the one that actually doesn't. Wow.
It's the only one that counters this play.
Oh my goodness. Wild to see that happen. I do think that was the correct thing for History of Waja 1 to do, though. Like, just, blind hit 2 back row and hope to snipe the Mirror Force.
Possibly.
But, yeah, I mean, there's always the debate, like, do you go for the blind MST?
It's typically, if you can win the game this turn, that's usually a good play.
Yeah. If you can win the game this turn and, like, going for that won't necessarily put you back too much, right? Yeah, but, knock on the set. This could potentially be a comeback for Dump Truck, depending on what History of Waja 1's got. Very interesting. Red Eye Solaris asked in chat, something I was wondering for the OCG rulings in Yata, is there, do they use, is there something different with the continuous traps in Yata than it is in other DM formats? So I think what that's asking is, like, in most DM form, or in all DM formats in the TCG, when a continuous trap is activated, you can't immediately use its, like, trigger effect, I guess you'd call it. So, like, if you activate,
offering.
Yeah, like, if you activate Ultimate Offering, you can't immediately use its effect to normal summon or set a monster. You have to flip it up, and then later on a different chain, you have to activate it to use its effect. And I believe it was like that at the OCG as well. So I don't think that there are any differences between. IO coming down here. That's really good on the Scapegoat there. But the third MST. Very interesting there. But yeah, I think that the continuous traps do work the same way that they do in the TCG at this time.
Struggling with the tokens. He wants the right color, I think. Yeah.
Oh yeah, they're trying to go for all the different colors. That's kind of cute. But yeah, Scapegoat has been putting in work in this match against Dump Truck. We saw in game 1, it protected them many times. Dump Truck had a very commanding position, but the Scapegoat allowed History Waja 1 to hold on for long enough to get back into it. Yeah, MST negates, let's go, says Adrian Brunner. And absolutely, yeah. The one thing MST does negate is basically IO, which is always fun to see. Kind of a counterintuitive interaction if you haven't played these formats before, because you think, like, I would just negate the MST that fired in response, but it's because it's chained to it. Oh, Raigeki here, very good. Potentially allows History Waja 1 to go for another push, but looks like they're just going to set one. I mean, I think that has to be like a Faith, right? Oh, knocking the set.
Yeah, it is a Faith.
It is a Faith. Okay, pretty good.
I saw him check the graveyard. I'm like, oh, he's seeing how many copies he needs to banish.
That's true. And that will indeed banish some Faiths from Dump Truck's graveyard. Now, that could potentially be rough for Dump Truck because Faith is a good comeback card. But how many Faiths has Dump Truck banished? They just banished 1. None engraved. So the set could be a Faith here, which would be pretty good. Dump Truck potentially getting back like Dark Hole or Pot of Greed. But it looks like that will not happen. So
I think, yeah, the Reborn would probably be grab the Jinzo again.
Yeah, but then if History Waja 1 has like another Scapegoat, kind of rough. But not really anything you can do about that anyways, so I think it's fine. But Mr. Cameo getting flipped up here, hitting into a token, and Dump Truck's just gonna pass back.
Sorry, I'm just joining the tournament. I'm seeing double recruiters from Dump Truck.
Oh yeah, no, that I don't think we saw that earlier as well. And they're on Scapegoat too. Okay. Will this get chained to with like an IO or something? No, it will not. And they're gonna chain an MST here, targeting a back row. Now this can be a little bit risky for Dump Truck because if History of YGO1 does have a way to clear the tomato, then the tomato will not
Do
be
we
able
see
to
Asura
summon.
Priest?
Yeah, well, if they've got a Serra Priest, but if they've got any monster to hit over a tomato, because Scapegoat prevents you from summoning the turn that it's used, Dumptrick won't get a card off it, but it looks like this Drew Wedge one's going to set one and pass. So, kind of interesting. Maybe a bit of a greedy Harpies there. But
yeah, not sure what the point of clearing it was if there was no follow-up.
maybe they had like a Change of Heart or Snatch Steal or something on the tomato and potentially a lethal line if the Scapegoat didn't get fired. But now that it has been, they don't necessarily want to clear up monster zones.
Yeah, may have
Yeah,
Reaper.
I think Change of Heart would be the most sense because then they could just Change of Heart and then summon any monster and just win the game right there.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of
So
sense.
they probably.
Yeah,
All right.
and because Change of Heart only lasts one turn, it doesn't make sense to do that into Scapegoats. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, Food. Adrian Brunner says in the chat, I see more goats being played in this game than in modern goat format, which is very funny because honestly, Scapegoat is a card that doesn't necessarily see play in a lot of Yata decks. People have experimented with it a little bit, but it's generally not a staple. But maybe, given some of the games we've seen here, maybe it deserves to be a staple. I'm curious to hear what all of your thoughts are out in the chat and also the commentators here. Do you think Scapegoat has a position in this metagame?
Most minor note. Combined in both graveyards, we have 7 quick play spells, which is a large number.
And I think Blah's used, or History of YGO1, I call them Blah because on the Discord they're Blah, but they've got a different DB name. But History of YGO1's used up 3 MSTs, and Dumptrick's used up 2, which can come up. Something interesting we saw in game 1 of this match was Dumptrick had played a Mirage and used up all their MSTs, so they didn't have a way to out it. So that could potentially be something that we see again, but it'll be interesting to see. Solaris says
deck out looking imminent.
Yeah, no, only 5 cards left. Full board on Dumptrick's part. Raigeki gone. Now Dark Hole is not gone. Meta for like 1,000 Eyes is not terrible, but also you're kind of locking yourself into 1 attack per turn. So kind of iffy.
Yeah, I would guess that there's another Hades or tribute monster in hand.
Yeah, or not. Parshath would have been really good there if they tributed over the 1,000 Eyes for Parshath. But because like Ring is gone, a lot of the defensive battle traps are gone. Now something interesting to note. Oh, Snatch on the Restrict is really good here. Because as we mentioned, deck out is kind of imminent, so you don't really necessarily care about the most damage. Oh, but a tribute summon here for a Jinzo. Yeah, that's really, really good. One of the few ways that History YGO1 had to end the game through like sort of not a cheesy method, but a potential way to end the game there would have been to like ring their own Hades or something, or just ring a monster with high attack. Because Dumptruck has only 2250 life points, but Jinzo does shut that down. Another Scapegoat. Last Scapegoat though. So this is a very, very interesting board state. Now, as I mentioned,
does there exist any niche card that would give History of YGO1 more cards in deck?
More cards in deck. Well, I think beyond, so Fiber Jars are banished. So I think beyond that, it's not really. Change of Heart on the Jinzo though, so that, well, they're attacking him with the Jinzo, so that means that they probably don't have like a Parshath. They might have like
another.
Yeah. Oh, they're just gonna.
Oh,
that's interesting. They've only used up 2 Metamorphoses, so I don't know. I feel like there was probably a better way to use that Change of Heart, because we know that they're playing tribute monsters. We've seen Metamorphoses, unless they've like cut one from their deck. They've only used up 2, so they could have changed.
I can only imagine that. Oh, sorry.
No, you go.
I was gonna say, I can only imagine Blaz maybe trying to get more deck information because it doesn't seem like he has a winning play here.
Yeah, but I mean that's not even more deck information because, I guess just letting it like last.
Letting the
bit,
game play out. Yeah.
But I feel like with the change, there were definitely like ways to finish this. Like Dark Hole is still in deck, so like they're like this isn't a foregone conclusion by any means.
He might be like saving Dark Hole for when he has like a final
is.
push. Oh,
Yeah, but that's even more
Does he
reason
have?
to
Wait,
just
wait.
keep the
He
change.
has Reborn. No, Reborn's used up. Oh God,
Yeah.
what does he have? Does he have
Could be
yeah, but
call.
like,
Yep, there's call.
have you still?
Call.
Oh, yeah.
Looks
Well,
like,
that wouldn't really work because then call would go away.
yeah, but MST.
I think this is going through.
Dumpshark has one more MST, so they asked for target. Oh, and they're chaining a Jinzo. Oh, that's great.
No way.
That's great. Yeah, that is really good. And see, this is a reason. Like, if History of YG wanted to save the change of heart, they would have won this turn. They might have snatched you, but like if Dumpshark has an MST here, yep, they do have the MST. So, that's why you don't necessarily waste the change of heart. There it was not a foregone conclusion by any means. But
yeah, if he kept the change of heart, he won.
Yeah, if he kept change, he just won there. That was a really bad change of heart.
Yeah, I really don't know why they did that. But I mean, I don't know. It when the games grind on this long, it can be easy to like sort of, lose track of things. Maybe just sort of give in to the hopelessness and be like, well, it's not gonna. I can't win this, so I might as well fire a change of heart, right?
I think that he completely forgot that he even had Dark Hole in the deck, so he was just trying to like destroy as many monsters that Dumpchuck had before he could get milled out.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And
yeah, that's like the only explanation there.
Yeah, and that can happen. I mean, like, the grind game is a lot of what draws people to these old formats. Because like, there's nothing really like this in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Because games last a much shorter time there. But the grind can get sort of mentally taxing, and it can potentially, force you into suboptimal plays. And that's what we saw there, I think. And it makes me wonder how Game 3 is going to go. Because I think, honestly, when you get to Game 3 of a match this long, it's really a lot about the mental warfare. And, like, which player is still, like, performing, maybe not at their best, but performing at a high enough level over the other player, right? So, yeah, I mean,
you may be so mentally fatigued. You even maybe 20 turns into this game, you go, oh, he's already used his Dark Hole, and then like you're actually thinking about from last game when he used it.
Exactly. That's something that happens with me often. Is I'm like, oh, this like, they've already used this, this, and this, and they just used it like 2 games ago. And I'm like, oh, damn, I forgot. It was such an iconic play that game. I thought they did it this game too. But yeah, that's why you always want to be checking the graveyard just in case. And so, keeping track of what players have used up is really, really important in a format like this.
And I do have just to keep myself memorized with all the formats. I pulled up the Yata ban list. I have it on my other monitor, and I immediately saw earlier you agreed that Yata was one of your favorite formats. And looking at the ban list, I can see why. It's because there is one graceful charity.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think I've said this before on my Discord, maybe not in a stream, but I think my least favorite format that I've covered so far is Joey Pegasus format, largely because that has 2 gracefuls. And the double graceful really makes the games feel a lot sackier. Which is kind of ironic. You'd think that each player having access to 2 would make the games less sacky because it's like, oh, you have more chances to draw it, so both players can pull it off, right? But the issue is that the turn 1 player has a much, much higher chance of drawing IO, which then shuts off their opponents, like Gracefuls and things. So it feels just too sacky to me. Like,
and there it is.
Yep, there's a Graceful. Speak of the devil, or speak of the angel, I guess. But I mean, that's just my opinion, though. Like, I do think that there are things to like about Joey Pegasus format. Because, it definitely does feel like very anime. Like you're playing all these power cards, like doing a long graceful turn feels kind of satisfying. So I'm not going to begrudge people who do enjoy it. I just it's not my cup of tea. But yeah, I mean, we might hold more locals in it in the future as well. So if you do enjoy it, don't worry. I do plan on continuing to cover it, but probably not for some time.
I think History of YGO1 is looking for a knock here.
Yeah, I mean, a knock would be pretty good. We saw how powerful knock was last game. That's another card that I think could see more play in the meta. Because
there it is.
Yeah,
I thought when he discarded 2 spells, I said he's setting Magician of Faith.
Yep. Although, to be fair, those are probably the least impact spells that they could have. But, ooh, Snatch, Sangan, Premature, Yata. Yeah, those that's a pretty good hand. Not gonna lie, the Yata is constant pressure.
Yeah, but knock into Yata would be
really rough. Yeah. I wonder if they drew the Forceful Sentry or if they already had it in hand. Because one thing that I like to do when I've got a hand rip and Graceful is like I fire, or if it's hand rip that gives me like knowledge, I fire the hand rip first and then I fire the Graceful, because then that informs me as to like what I need to discard, right? Like,
oh, fake this out.
Yeah, okay. Tomato, that's a good way to dodge around Trap Hole, or TT, I guess. But yeah, nothing in the back row because History Wide 1 probably has to read that the back row's dead. But yeah, going for
tomatoes is kind of bad here because now 1 tomato from Dump Truck could mostly wipe the board.
Yeah, so it's kind of awkward, but if you draw the 2 tomatoes in hand anyways, it's kind of rough either way.
Yeah.
So I get why they did it. This also lets them get aggressive here. And Dump Truck's trying to search out a Reaper.
Oh, they're probably going to Snatch here or Premature.
Yeah, the issue with Snatch is that it's awkward because Dump Truck or History of YG1 gets both the searches off the tomatoes.
Yeah.
So
wait, but I feel lost. What's the issue with the 2 tomatoes?
So the issue is if like Dump Truck brings out a tomato of their own, right, and hits into 1, like eventually the History of YG1's gonna have to not bring out tomatoes, right? Because they've already got 2 on field, so they've only got 1 left in deck. So tomato crashes into 1 tomato that brings out like let's say the last tomato, and Dump Truck brings out a tomato. That tomato hits into the last tomato.
Or that.
Oh well, Raigeki also, yeah.
Yep, Yata.
Yeah, but Yata's gone. Yata's in grave. But honestly, I think Reaper is probably a good option as well.
I'd rather have Yata.
Yeah, I think maybe like call is definitely something that you have to worry about. Like the thing with Yata is if History YG1 had any disruption for the Yata, then you were basically sunk, and that's what happened. So yeah, I mean, I personally probably would have kept the Yata there either way. I mean, like you say, like Yata's really good, but I mean, having the Forceful Follow-Up is not bad as well. Sending a Snatch, that makes a lot of sense because Snatch can out the Reaper.
Now, something I was surprised I didn't see last game. We saw that Dump Truck he's on Yatagarasu, he's on Giant Rat, he's on Mystic Tomato, he's on Scapegoat. It seems like the perfect deck to be running Creature Swap, but I don't think we've seen it yet.
Yeah, Creature Swap is also a very interesting card. Because it actually was in a Yata deck in the last tournament, I believe. I think GBO brought like a Creature Swap sort of recruiter deck. Oh, that's really good here. So well, yeah, they gotta use yeah. The MST goes for that. But then like if you want to use Harpies here, like you clear like the pre-mat, sure, but then Dump Truck gets a search. So do you even want Harpies this?
I think that was his reasoning for the part of it for the Premature was to dissuade heavier Harpies.
Yeah. So I think this is looking pretty good for Dump Truck here. If History of YG1 attacks into the Sangan, Dump Truck gets to search out like an Exiled, and feeling pretty good about that. So
now, can you experts help me out with this? I got destroyed in some tournament game because my opponent had Mirage and I had Harpies, and I was like, wait, if I Harpies it, he doesn't have to discard. So yeah. I just let it sit there for like 5 turns, and I was like, should I have done it from the first turn?
I think I don't know. It's always tricky to say. Like, I think if it's going on for 5 turns, so like the thing with Mirage is that like they've got to clear it themselves, right? Or else they have to keep discarding. Um. Oh, and there's a fiber jar. Okay, that's pretty good.
That
here.
is a 3,800 life point differential, and
Yeah.
and no normal summon used yet, correct?
No normal summon used. That's exactly where you want to be. If you're History of YGO1, you've got the initiative. You can just attack in, potentially hand rip your opponent. Like, yeah, Fiber Jar is insane. And we've been seeing the power of it in these matches here.
And I think this comes down to, did he open a hand rip or graceful or pot?
Yeah. Well, there's pot. So that's one of them.
Pot into graceful, into forceful.
I mean, it wouldn't be the first time. Yep, pot into graceful. There we go. So yeah, this is likely the end of the game, basically. Not entirely, but like it's very, very likely because when you get to see this much of your deck on the first turn, you're very likely to have at least one hand rip. You've gone up in card advantage. You get to plan your play pretty well. Yeah, there's a comfy. So yeah, there are things Dump Truck can draw here to get them out of it. But it's kind of rough.
Let's see if he had the answer going to the graveyard.
It might. Yeah.
I want to see discard Jinzo and then History of YGO1 reborns it.
That would be very funny. Actually, that might be the end of the game if that happens, depending on what else History of YGO1 has. But it'd be very interesting to see. I just want to spend while History of YGO1 is thinking. I want to mention the chats that got in here. So Adrian Brunner says MST negates the win, and yeah, MST negate is very strong. And it's why like I think MST is better than like heavy in this format, honestly, which may seem weird.
And that's why the hand rips are so broken, because Dump Truck could have gone off himself, and now he doesn't get the chance to.
Yeah. Whoa. Okay. That is a pretty good hand. Not gonna lie. Painful Duo, Jar of Greed, Duster. I mean, if any hand can get Dump Truck back into this game, it's probably that.
If Dump Truck had just gotten to go first.
I mean, yeah, the graceful there, ooh, that would have been pretty good. But
top deck spot.
Yeah, I mean that would be the way to complete this hand for sure.
Have you ever seen Fiber Jar resolve in this format, and then on the same turn, somebody's deck only has 30 cards left, without any banishes?
Only 30. Oh, actually, no, I don't. I think this is the first time. Because you need pot graceful for that to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it's not.
Or I guess painful choice.
Yeah, or painful. Yeah. Yeah. So the real thing is when they have 25 cards left in deck after Fiber Jar resolves on that turn. But let's see what Dump Truck sends here. This is a very, very important painful.
All the broken cards are already in his hand.
Yeah. Looks like they're sending a bunch of monsters here. Which I think does make sense.
Oh, that's right. He doesn't have a monster in hand, so he just has to get one.
Yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense for Dump Truck to do here. Industry Wide One's going to give Dump Truck the tomato, which may mean that they don't necessarily have a way to clear like a Reaper. Duo coming down here. Kind of interesting ordering, but that means that Dump Truck probably isn't going to be attacking this turn. Oh, well, I guess now you potentially could attack because Sangan and Witch are in grave. So you're not necessarily as worried about a search. But I guess you might be worried about Faith.
Yeah, I think the thought process is give him tomato because, I mean, all the targets are in the grave now. I guess you can go into Witch or Sangan.
Yeah. And there is a Faith. What's it going to bring back is the question.
I think I'm getting Pot of Greed here.
Yeah, I mean, Pot's pretty good, but depending on what the hand is, Graceful could also be potentially good.
You can't go wrong.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a lot of great choices here. I mean, even Comfy is not that bad.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah, Confiscation could have cleared the Duster or yeah.
Pot comes down. Forceful.
That's why you get Pot.
Yep. And Harpies and Lily.
Clear the Lily.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting choice. Yeah, Lily is definitely the one that you pick because, like, you know, well, wait, why No, why would you pick the Lily, actually? Because Dumptruck's at 3,200.
I think he's... Well, I guess that's
Oh,
why.
because Lily clears Hades. Yeah, that would do it.
Well, I was just thinking, keep him out of monsters. You know, what are you going to do with Harpies and no monster to summon?
Well, the idea would be that Tomato gets you back a monster. But if you had Hades, then that makes perfect sense. Go into the Tomato. You know the Jar's on field. Jar can draw into something good, potentially. So, you know, Dumptruck is still in it, for sure. But a bit interesting here. Yeah, just fire the Jar. You know, try and dig deeper.
I would like to see a Solemn.
That would be very funny, Solemning the Jar. I mean, it could happen.
Oh, wow.
And Exiled is the top deck, so that will clear the Hades there. Still a bit of an awkward spot to be in.
One of the few monster effects that gets over Hades.
Yeah. But still 1,400 hidden in here. This will make the Lily dead in the future if Dumptruck redraws it. So, and Dumptruck is a bit lower on monsters because now they sent 5 to grave with Painful, and so they're less likely to top deck them. So
now, do you think that's the Duster set?
I think it might. Yep, there's the Duster. Yeah. I didn't want to say anything about it like a pro Duster, but like, yeah, I think that was the thing that made the most sense there.
Search a Jinzo here.
Yeah, no Jinzo and Grave. That would actually be pretty insane, but I mean, they can search Jinzo now.
And we see what you were talking about. I was gonna say he doesn't use the Scapegoat so he can keep Tomato. It's actually because he used the Call to Haunted.
Yeah. But Serpent's kind of an interesting pick. I think it's not a bad pick. Because you're in a position where you're likely gonna win. It's just kind of inevitable. So you just keep the chump blocker up. You turn on your metamorphoses if you draw them, you know.
Yeah.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Wow.
Sangan's a very, very good monster there.
One of the best cards you could have top decked.
Yeah. Right, Solari's asks, will it be Jin's over? That's the question. Sangan searching Witch. Not the worst. I think, honestly, it might have been better just to search Fiber Jar there because, like, you know.
And we did see he had it from the Nobleman across that earlier.
Yeah. Could have sided it out, I guess. But.
Yeah.
Setting one, setting another.
What are the odds it's a Fiber Jar?
If that's another Fiber Jar, then this game is Jin's over. It's maybe not through Jinzo, but it probably is over. The fact that it's true YG1 is thinking here means that it probably is not a Fiber Jar. Because if it was Fiber Jar, you just slam that baby real easy. And then you just try and kill your opponent from what you draw there.
Oh, that's right. Because if you draw like a Gemini Elf, then there's no way for Dumptruck to respond.
Yep, Fiber Jar. Yep.
Is he running a beater like Gemini Elf?
I don't actually know. I don't think we've seen them. But yeah, 900th Fiber Jar of the night. Yeah. I mean, Fiber Jars can make the games last long, but again, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. And I think there are some interesting sort of things to consider. Like, if you set a Fiber Jar, you have to worry about your opponent triggering that Fiber Jar instead of you. And then it's like, you know, do you take that risk? Do you not? Do you keep it in hand for when you're on the defensive? Like, very, very interesting. But I do think that, like, you know, looking at these games, people might be like, oh, you know, Fiber Jar is so degenerate because it made the game stretch out longer. But honestly, I think it's like every time the Fiber Jars will there be another Graceful? That's the question.
Come on.
Will there be another Graceful? Let's see it.
I want to see Forceful Confiscation Duo.
Okay, Forceful. So they likely don't just have a beater here to end the game, right?
I mean, even Tomato feels like as close to game as you can get.
Oh yeah,
I mean, they could be trying to have like a conf or a duo and then pop one of their monsters and then reborn it for a game.
That could be true, yeah. But would you fire Forceful first? Or wouldn't you just fire Comfy first?
If they have duo, then they might want to Forceful one of their spells if they have low monsters in hand.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, so that could definitely be it.
Sounds like once again, Dump opened very broken, but he's just getting the cards taken away from him.
Yeah, send him back the Reaper. Wonder what else was in the hand.
There's
Tomato
the
does come
tomato.
down. Yep. And if they've got a ring, that's the end of the game.
If they've got anything.
Well, there are ways that Dump Truck can potentially get back. But
Ooh.
okay, that's why
Gravekeepers
they said
fine.
really, because 2 walls to prevent them from taking more damage. Yeah, Brad Solaris brings up a good point. It plays around Karibo to go for the thing. Forceful there. Oh, we don't know one of the cards in hand. We just know Spy, TT, Tomato. So maybe Sentry was the other card. And they just figured that would get fired right away. But sending back Hades, that is the right choice there, in my opinion. And they're just going to set one, set another, pass. Probably the Spy, right?
I think that's not the torrential. Big brain. Big brain.
It is the torrential. But honestly, like, with torrential, like, you don't necessarily want to fire it when you've got a Spy set, right? Now the question is, what's Dump Truck going to do here? Exiled on the Tomato. That's pretty good. And then just choosing the pass. So, I mean, honestly, it's very risky. But I might have just flipped up the Spy and hit in with 2 spies.
Exactly what I was going to say. I think you have to.
But the question is, like, how is Dump Truck going to win in this scenario? Because even flipping up the Spy is basically a death sentence if he draws, like, anything remotely decent.
If he draws anything remotely decent, it's already the end of the game, right?
Blah doesn't have anything that can kill over Spy, I don't think. He's mostly running under 1,500 monsters.
Yeah, from what we've seen.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Now, it is important to note,
I guess Dump Truck's just trying to stall.
Yeah.
Even though Fiber Jars reset the game, Dump Truck can't use Premature anymore.
Yes. There are actually a couple cards that Dump Truck can't use at that low life.
Yeah, and then Ring is also useless. There's like a lot of cards that are now useless to his life total.
Oh wait, but Ring can pop the Faith. It can still do that.
Yeah.
I guess. You have to flip the Spy.
Yeah. I think in this scenario, you have to flip the Spy, yeah. There's nothing else you could do. You can't just, like, stall out 28 cards.
Yeah.
Especially if you have Raigeki, Dark Hole, Harpies.
And also, like, History of YGO 1's going to draw Fiber Jar eventually anyways. So, like,
yeah.
You know, I think you just got to get aggressive. It may feel really weird and very, very scary. But, like,
yeah, that's a better flip. That's last game?
Yep. But, I mean, if they had Ring, either way, you were dead, you know?
Yeah,
so
didn't matter.
Like, yeah. So
that was just a completely lost position.
Yeah, but very, very good games there. Very cool to see. And
all right, now I have to face Blah.
Yeah, good luck. From what we've seen there, very formidable. So good luck. This is actually not the finals. This is the
the semis.
So Aratos will be waiting a little bit longer. But I mean, I think that honestly, yeah, like Janjo Zone says, don't complain. Fiber means more Yu-Gi-Oh! And honestly, I'm sort of in a similar boat, right? So I am perfectly happy seeing some Fiber Jars get flipped because it means more Yu-Gi-Oh! More fun.
Yeah, fun fact, if Dueling Book had not created that Fiber Jar macro, we would still be in game 2 right now.
Yeah. Like, that's also another thing. Like, I think if we had to manually do it, I think people would hate Fiber Jar a lot more than they do now because it'd be very, very frustrating to actually resolve. But, you know, because Dueling Book has put that in, it makes it a lot easier to use. I will say in the replays, like when I do like replays for my videos, it is still kind of annoying because you have to like manually, like I just do next play to get through my replays. Yeah. So like you have to manually click every next play in the Fiber Jar thing. So it still does take some time there. But honestly, that's a price I'm willing to pay if the actual gameplay is more, you know, smooth and quick. So, yeah, but...
And we have some respect for the macro being created in the comments.
Exactly. We got to get that respect on them. I mean, I think the DB's done a lot of good stuff recently for more retro formats. I mean, you see on screen right now, like Edison format lobby is up. And I think that's really good. Like, DB paid attention to the sort of needs of the community. People saying, like, we want an Edison format ladder. And like they eventually did it. Like there was a long time where people thought, DB's never gonna add the Edison ladder, because it's been so long already. But they took the time and they did it. So I think that's really nice to see.
I've been devouring Edison format videos on YouTube.
Oh, Edison's great. Like, and also it's cool seeing a lot of content creators in that space. Because Edison is another format where there's a lot of experimentation that can be done. Pretty big card pool. So even if like some of the top decks are known, it's not necessarily as like set in stone as something like GOAT. And there are also like more sort of complicated relationships between different types of decks than like the GOAT triangle, for instance. This isn't to say like Edison's better than GOAT. Like I don't necessarily have an opinion about which one is better. Like I think they're both great formats, so you can't go wrong with either. But it is just yeah. I've played some Edison before and some GOAT, and it's very fun. But
yeah, as was pointed out to me, Edison is not, unlike almost every other format is named after a card or deck, but Edison is so diverse. It's just called Edison.
Yeah. Can you imagine if it had just been called Quick Draw? Like you're like, oh, Quick Draw Dandy Warrior 1. So like, let's just call it Quick Draw, right? That will age very well. Because
yeah, it would be called, if they were to name it today, it would be called Value, however you pronounce it.
Yeah, because Value decks are definitely very, very formidable. But the cool thing is like you see the topping deck list, and I think at the last like really big Edison tournament, like the RBET Rulers, I think like there was basically a completely diverse top cut. Like there was only one deck repeated, I think, in top cut, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, great quote. I actually just heard. I was watching on the way back from the gym. I still had to nerd out. Graceful in the pot.
Yep,
But
there we go.
I heard a quote from Fraser Smith. He said, if you top in a tournament, you're probably good, but you're definitely lucky.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a very good quote. And Fraser Smith like knows, like they've been around the game for a long time, like playing competitively for a really long time. So like they're one of the best people that you can actually like listen to about like the philosophy of the game. And I highly recommend the I Am Nerd podcast that they run. I think it's really, really good and has some really, really good insights, not just for Edison, but for like basically any format you can play. But yeah, I think that's very, very true. Like Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a game of high variance, and there's always going to be a luck factor involved. And some people may view that as a negative. I think it's kind of a positive. I like the fact that there's luck involved. If I wanted a game...
Super quick, I hate to interrupt, but this is a very rare moment. We've seen 10 cards this duel. All of them are limited.
Yeah. Well, you say rare moment, but in Yata, maybe not as rare as in other formats because people just pack their decks to the brim with all those powerful limited cards.
Let's make it. Let's count. Let's count until we see a non-limited card.
Yeah. But
Magician of Faith.
I will say on the topic of that painful choice there, I'm really not a fan of sending Serpent off painful choice.
Really?
My reasoning for this is like there's really no reason for your opponent not to give you Serpent. The only reason if they're playing like Kaiku and they can like attack in and banish the Serpent, and either way you've lost the Serpent there. But if they give you the Serpent, like you were gonna get that back anyways. You've lost 4 cards that are potentially good. So I just really don't like it. I mean, if you're deck thinning, sure. But like I feel like it's much better in general, like to actually give your opponent a real painful choice.
Well, I suck at the game, so I run Painful Choice so that I can search my Sinister Serpent. I would love that card.
I mean, honestly, it's not the worst. If you do want to search Sinister Serpent, like, you can do that. And it's not bad to get Serpent in rotation. The issue is, like, part of the power of Painful Choice is you force your opponent into a difficult decision. And sending Serpent, like, basically makes that decision completely easy. Like, it's not painful at all. You just give them Serpent. But...
So I completely agree with your point, but giving your opponent a free Serpent can be painful.
Oh, it can be, because you're like, damn, Serpent's in rotation now. But it ultimately it's the least of the painful options. So,
and we see the most limited card.
Yeah, Twin-Headed Behemoth. I was mentioning this earlier in the stream actually, where it's kind of funny we get to see some of the power of Twin-Headed Behemoth, but it's not really the reason why it's on the limited list. Like the reason it's on the limited list is because of this weird ruling with it where like it says you can only use the effect of Twin-Headed Behemoth once per duel. And initially, like the way that card text was written, this wasn't written out this way. So like in modern Yu-Gi-Oh, with that wording, no matter which Twin-Headed Behemoth you used, you'd only be able to use the effect of one of them once per duel, right? But back in the old days, things didn't quite work out that way. There was no problem solving card text. And so if you had multiple behemoths in your deck, you could potentially use the effect of each one once per duel. But if you have something like Fiber Jar running around in the format and you shuffle back in Twin-Headed Behemoths into your deck, then how do you tell which behemoth has used its effect or not, right? So it led to rulings nightmares, and that's why the card got limited for good reason. It's not necessarily the most powerful card, but like you don't want to have multiple of it in a format.
I want to spend one day in the parallel universe where Konami said, "Oh, you have to put like a little mark on each copy of Twin-Headed Behemoth after you use it."
I honestly like on my Discord server we have like an LOD format, which is like you know basically fiber format, but without the fiber limitless. So you get to play with all the copies of Twin-Headed Behemoth that you want because it's in Legacy of Darkness.
Oh, do you use proxies?
Well, we haven't actually played enough games in it to actually like figure out how to rule this. But if you ever want to do that, you know, you can hop on over to there. I think honestly, the way we'd resolve it would be just like I don't know how we'd resolve it honestly.
Yeah, have them run like a Skull Servant would be like the second copy, and like a Karibo would be the third copy.
Well, okay, what you can actually do, which is kind of funny, if you have a fusion deck. What you can do is you can bring out, and like Fiber Jar is resolving, you can bring out a fusion monster onto your field and banish one of the twin heads from your graveyard and treat the fusion monster as the twin head, because in Dueling Book, it will actually shuffle back the fusion monster into your regular deck when Fiber Jar is resolving.
But wait, but hold on.
So there's
don't you still need like a cop for like the actual deck list? Don't you still need to run 3 copies of Twin-Headed?
Yeah, but the issue with Twin-Headed comes when Fiber Jar is shuffling it back, right? So what you can do is
I get what you mean.
Yeah. So if Fiber Jar is resolving, you banish the twin head that's, you know, in grave or on field and has resolved its effect, and you just bring out a random fusion monster just to serve as your proxy. And then
unfortunately, Arados has some bad news for you.
Oh, what's Arados saying? They fixed the fiber. Oh, they fixed the Fiber Jar bug. Damn. I mean, probably for the best, but yeah, unfortunate for this solution. So yeah, I'm not sure then what you do there then. Yeah, nothing doing, I guess. A lot's happened in this game, by the way. We didn't really mention it, but some very interesting text from Raga Draga with the Kaiku, Bazoo, and Gemini Elf. What is this, Android format?
Yeah. I think that's I'm so used to older formats now that's not weird, but I think the biggest shock if somebody comes to a retro format for the first time, they see like Graceful Charity, Painful Choice, Mirage of Nightmare, like and Gemini Elf. By the way.
Yeah, the spells easily outclass the monsters in most cases. Change Mark coming down here on one of the sets, and Call of the Haunted as well. Bring back Jinzo likely. Well, Bright Dragon is asking the target, so. But the target might be Trag, except Trag is not in this format.
Yeah, I thought it was declaring trigger. I've been watching a lot of Edison formats.
Yeah. Oh, I do want to mention, because in the comments there were some discussion about some other formats. Jan just says, Goat, Edison, nah, play Perfect Circle. And Perfect Circle is a really, really fascinating format that I'm really excited to cover when I get to the GX ones, because there's a lot of very interesting sort of skill-intensive matches in Perfect Circle. So I'm very excited for that. Red Solari says Blackwing's format for Edison. That's what it should be called. And honestly, not a bad name. James Zone says, if GOAT was named today, it would be Chaos Turbo format. And yeah, that's the way that recent tournament results have been seeming. And yeah, and Adrian Brenner says, or Chaos Warrior. And yeah, that's a very good name for it as well. But yeah, and then Red Eye Solari says, I generally send Serpent if I have Charity in hand. That's not the worst option as well, but still for your opponent, there's no reason not to give you the Serpent, because like you're just giving them an option of what to discard, right? You're like, well, they could discard the card that I add off Painful, or they could just keep it in hand to use better later, right?
Well,
So,
maybe I can phrase it like this to you. Would you run a card that says send any 4 cards to the graveyard, add Sinister Serpent to your hand?
well, I think it depends on the situation, right? Like, honestly, I'm not sure that card would be worth maining if that was the only thing it did. Which is why I say that
if you don't want Sinister Serpent, you can add some other card.
Yeah, well, that's basically what like Painful Choice is. And like again, I don't think that like adding Serpent is the wrong choice in every scenario. There definitely are some scenarios where you would want it to hand. But like for instance, like if you're sending like Sangans and Witches, for instance, like you can search out Serpent.
Change a card into fiber.
Oh, okay. That's really good for Ragadrago here because now they've got the initiative on this Fiber Jar.
I need YGO1 to get a taste of his own medicine.
Yeah, so Fiber Jar does, because of the way that, well, maybe they fixed this bug as well, but basically from resolving Fiber Jar, if you control a monster that your opponent originally owned, it will get shuffled into your deck. Or no, it won't get shuffled into your deck, but it will get shuffled into your opponent's deck like after they shuffle and draw, which is obviously not the best because then you know that they can't have that card in hand. So yeah, honestly, Danger Zone says take a shot every time someone activates Fiber. Honestly, take a shot every time History of YGO1 activates Fiber.
He didn't there.
Yeah, no, that's true, but it was his Fiber, so it's kind of funny. Adrian Brunner says we need more soft once per dual effects. That's kind of interesting, kind of an interesting take. Honestly, I don't hate it. I think it would be an interesting sort of thing to add to the design philosophy of the game because generally, you guys moved away from like soft effects because there's so much recurability in a lot of things, and it can lead to just broken combos that the designers didn't necessarily anticipate. But maybe there's something there to sort of add to the game. But yeah, the Spirit Reaper will get popped by the Snatch Steal. But
now I think they did do that. They did that mechanically correctly. I think Spirit Reaper switches possession and then is destroyed.
Yeah, because it happens once it resolves. So yeah, it would switch and then get destroyed.
It meant nothing, but they did it right.
Yeah. Reaper was targeted. So after resolving card effect, the targets this face-up card, destroy this card. Yeah.
Wait, go in there and say in this format, the TCG ruling says it doesn't.
Yeah, no, actually, but TT on the Witch is very interesting. Yeah, that's kind of weird, but if I don't know, Rayo Dragon might have more offensive pressure here to hit in, but I don't know, that seems very strange.
I was gonna say you have to love Fiber Jar being resolved on History of YGO1, and Drago does not get Pot of Greed, does not get Graceful Charity, does not get Confiscation.
Yeah, but it's not the ring on a Sank. Okay, so it's interesting both ways here. But
Blah's nervous. What?
Yeah, I mean, it might just be like you're getting them down to 2,800. You've got you searched Jinzo, so that means that History YG1 has to have another monster in hand, probably. Oh,
yeah, okay,
so
Call
would also do it in the end phase. Why in the end phase here?
He thinks that he thinks that Jinzo is not going to leave the field. That's why I wanted to get the damage in while he could.
I was just a bit confused about like why doing call in the end phase because the set card that Rayo Drago had, I think, was set the turn prior, right? So you're only opening up yourself to an MST from Rayo Drago's hand, right?
Yes, I think if we're being super best play possible, I guess you MST first in case it's a set MST. So he'll chain MST. You can call
that's the end of the game.
Search.
Reborn into Jinzo into Reborn. Yeah, very good game one there.
It was an exciting game. Yeah.
Very exciting game. I mean, we saw Fiberjar putting in work there, just like it has all night, honestly. And I don't know. I guess people could look at these games and be like, look at how long the game's gone on. Like Fiberjar is so degenerate and stuff. But I don't know. I view this as a plus. Like Janjo said, more Yu-Gi-Oh. More fun.
I will step away for about 2 minutes and
yeah,
be
no
back.
problem. This gives me time to look at some of the other comments here. Red Eye Solari says food playing the old school Yata format decks, and I mean, I did mention how a lot of the old school Yata decks are sort of like worse than a lot of the modern decks, just based on like experimentation and stuff. But it can be potentially good. And it can potentially win some games. So we'll have to see if History Wide 1's able to continue the streak going forward. Although I'm not sure how many Metamorphosis decks were really played at the time. Food was. Okay, Food. Yeah. Food is playing more of a Yata format deck, playing all the old beaters and stuff. Janjo Zone says, take a shot every time. So, I mentioned that before. That's a good way to get in a very dangerous situation. Adrian Brunner says Yata format is the true fiber format, which, it's kind of funny. We called it fiber format because that's when Fiberjar came out, and it definitely did have a major impact on that format. But given how many times we've seen Fiberjar and Yata, maybe it's a bit, not as big a deal. Did they discard off did they fire Graceful here and not discard off it? What was added off the... Oh, they had pot off the... Okay, yeah. I just misread what happened there. I thought for a second that Mr. Wager wanted given Rider Drago Graceful, but that was not the case. Blind MST on the back row. Was a Trap Hole. Trap Hole is an interesting card here as well. I didn't mention this yet. Trap Hole is kind of like... Trap Hole and TT have an interesting relationship. TT is at 3 copies in Yata format. But potentially there are situations where you want to preserve your board presence and keep attacking in. So, in those cases, Trap Hole can be potentially better. I actually think in Android format, I like Trap Hole a little bit more than TT, because in Android format, it's all about preserving your big beaters. And Trap Hole is a great way to do that. But I feel like in Yata format, you do want to play more TTs than Trap Holes because of things like Yatagarasu, which, if Yatagarasu gets in and hits in, if you get a set Trap Hole, that doesn't help you, but the TT will. Now, given the History of Wajio 1's playing a bunch of scapegoats, maybe that's why they're playing Trap Hole as well.
I think it's Hadez and Thousand Eyes are strict. I think those are 2 power cards he wants to keep protected.
That's a very good point as well, especially because Hadez cannot be revived. But Thousand Eyes here is going to be pretty decent. Sucking up probably the Elf, right? Adrian Brenner asked a very good question in the chat. BWW, what is the next format you cover on the channel called? And it's called Vampire, as Rai Solaris just said. That will be with the, cards from Dark Crisis and using the, I believe, February 2004 Limitless. It might be March, though. I forget what month it was in 2004, but yeah, that'll be the first 2004 format that we're covering here, which is wild to say, but very cool to see. We'll also be covering, like, the Unlimited Magician's Force format as well. And maybe the Unlimited DCR format before the Vampire format, but I generally prefer to cover, like, the additions to the card pool when I cover, like, the actual format with the limited list, because more people actually watch that, so it makes sense.
I guess Raigeki is in hand.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you kind of have to be. Heavy... I mean, yeah, you gotta have a way to clear the Thousand Eyes here, or else you wouldn't fire the heavy, right?
You still can't attack.
Yeah. Yeah, so Thousand Eyes goes down to 0/0, but you can't hit over it, so...
This might be too easy of a
Rad says, who cares? Lol, yeah, it doesn't really matter there. But... No, you can't attack in a Thousand Eyes. Thousand Eyes restricts that.
Ooh, he thinks it's relinquished.
Yeah, no. Yeah. So that might be really, really rough for Riot Drago here.
He threw away heavy and MST to take out an MST, essentially.
Yeah, that's pretty rough. I mean, you did take out just the MST, yeah. Oof. Unfortunate. But
and you lose your Zalug.
yeah, which is quite unfortunate. But depends on what the set is. So we'll have to see here what actually happens.
You know what I think the set is.
It would be very funny. Well, wait. Look, I know History Divider 1 likes to listen in on these streams, so let's hold off on the guesses for now because I'm curious to see what they're gonna do. But looks like they are gonna attack in. Were you thinking Zalug? But just Serpent.
Oh no, I was thinking Fiber Jar.
Oh, Fire Jar would have also been extremely funny there. But I thought it would have been hilarious if it was another Zalug and History Divider 1 just hits in and takes 100.
Yeah. Now Serpent does hard counter Thousand Eyes Restrict.
It does, and that's one of the reasons why like for instance, like Goat Control, where you're just playing like Goat's metas and going into Thousand Eyes, is a bit more awkward in this format than it would be in something like Goat because there's no Tsukiyomi.
Yeah, you have to have Tsukiyomi.
So, yeah. Oh, yep, and there we go. There's the Fiber Jar. Now History Divider 1 did not normal summon this turn, so they will be able to commit a monster to field next turn. But this turn. But
this turn.
Yeah. Which is very important. Very important distinction.
While we wait for this to resolve, this might be, as I said, this might be too easy of a trivia question. But next format, Vampire format, of course, named after Vampire Lord, an incredibly strong card that was completely invalidated with the release of what monster?
DD Warrior Lady. Yeah.
Possible. I was thinking Cyber Dragon.
Oh, well, that also works, yeah. But it's funny because we were discussing this on the Discord a while back when just talking about the upcoming Vampire format. And a lot of the like modern lists for Vampire, and I say modern, but like the last tournament was held like a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, forget when. But a lot of those lists not playing Vampire at all, because triple DD Warrior Lady is just so strong, and it just really shuts down Vampire completely. And oftentimes, the effect to mill a card is often detrimental to you because your opponent just sends the worst card they have in their deck.
Yeah, if people were running like lots of them, I was going to start maining Despair from the Dark and send it if they call monster.
Well, that would actually be that's a super cool counterplay actually. Yeah, Serpent will get its effect. What? Wait, no. That's a Serpent. Yeah. Okay. Oh, well, hopefully that doesn't come back to bite them there. But I mean, it's fine. Both players have sort of, had brain farts in this match so far. Hitting meta.
That was the card to save them.
Yeah. MSTing and MST, which MSTs? What is it, MSTing?
Why the oh,
okay. Okay. Yeah, that works too. Means the back row must be pretty important. And honestly, I mean, having the IO up is really nice here.
Yeah, an IO up with a Zalug and Bazoo on field, I'm feeling pretty good right now.
Yeah.
I think you pay it at least a turn. It depends what your hand is.
Yeah. Oh, okay. They're letting it go. Could be a knock set. Could be, I don't know. It's interesting because Red Dragon knows it's not a Serpent. The Serpent was not added back. And Meta's coming back though, so
does he have a way to stop Zalug? Or is this a 50-50 to decide?
It's a 50-50 now. Another reason to add back the Serpent is that it buffs up your hand a bit for the Zalug hit. I'll hit another Faith. Honestly, pretty good. I wouldn't complain about hitting a Faith.
He didn't add the Serpent back?
He didn't add it last turn, no.
Was that a mistake?
Yeah. Oh, and there he adds it this turn because, goes for the meta. It was a major mistake, I think. You want to always add back Serpent. And, I forget to do this too. Like, it's not it's not the easiest thing to remember, but it is very, very important in these games just to, adding back Serpent, it costs you nothing and can really come up in a lot of situations. So Bazoo hitting over the Zalug, cutting off the discards there. Now the question is History Divider 1 going to meta into Darkfire Dragon?
The
answer appears to be no.
Why not? Why not just meta the Serpent?
Yeah, I mean, there's not really a reason not to unless you. I mean, like you could be afraid of like removal.
Yeah, I guess he knew he had the scapegoat, so
Yeah,
no big
or you
deal.
meta a goat token. But honestly, metaing a serpent is much
But
better.
yeah, you don't want to waste your Sinister Serpent. Yeah.
Yeah. Vatos brings up a good point. There's no secret barrel yet that comes out in breaker format, and so there's really no reason not to add back serpent. So yeah. Let's see. I mean, I guess maybe card destruction if you're worried about like empty jar plays, but like that's very, very rare, and you'll know when a deck is on empty jar. So it's not really. Yeah, you always want to be adding back the serpent.
I guess you set Serpent and meta because you want to keep the goat tokens.
Yeah,
just in
exactly.
case.
That's what I think you probably do here. Thousand Trick can prio. So, but if you chain to it, you stop it from equipping, right? Like if you chain ring to it, yeah. So if you chain ring to it, then it will stop it from equipping that monster because it's just targeted. And there's nothing to equip it to after Thousand Trick is destroyed.
Wait,
So.
Arados says with Mirage sometimes you decline Serpent. I thought the point of Serpent was you get to add it back to your hand and then discard for.
Oh no! Wait, I know what Aratus is saying here. I think you might want to draw more
Oh,
cards.
to activate Mirage after and draw more cards.
Yeah. So basically, if you're on the turn where you're firing Mirage, then you might keep Serpent Engrave. If you already have like the MST, then you're like, I just want to draw more here, and so that makes sense. That's a good point, Aratus. That is probably
so he uses the goat token.
Okay. Going for ring.
Rings it.
Yeah. Snatch on the Bazoo.
And he's only got a Serpent in hand, so
yeah,
like an MST could be powerful here.
Yeah, and honestly, this isn't like the best for History of YGO1 because like Rider is just gonna gain that 1,000 back every turn. So, it's not the worst unless History of YGO1 wants to start like banishing cards from grave. Like, you could probably banish or restrict without really much consequence because like you've got other restricts in the extra deck.
I was thinking about it, but banishing would conflict with his favorite card.
Well, that's why you banish or restrict because you've got other restricts in the extra deck. So you figure you don't need all three, and you can like banish this one, right?
Now I forget. Is this monsters only, or this is spells and traps too?
It's just monsters. So
it's just monsters. Okay, because I was thinking you could ban. You don't necessarily want to banish any of these spells, but it's a cool way to deck then with Fiber Jar.
Yeah, no, it definitely is, and that would be like, and that's part of the neat thing about Fiber format is that in Fiber format, like you have Bazoo, Kaiku, and Skull Lair being able to banish spells and traps. And so you do have things where like, you hit him with a Kaiku, banish your opponent's power spells from the grave, and then they don't get them back with Fiber Jar. And it can lead to some very interesting sort of situations. Which, I really do like Fiber Jar or Fiber format a lot. Like, I think it's very, very cool. And I think that there's a lot to experiment with there as well. So I encourage people to try
we have a
that
cool
out.
comment from Solaris.
Oh, yeah, it is. Wait, which one? There are a couple cool comments in.
Very, very last one for Vampire.
Yeah. Could a zombie skill drain work? The recruiters still work under it, and it can stop cards like Wang Hu and Warrior Lady. Potentially. I mean, it does stop the Warrior Lady, which is pretty good. The issue with like skill drain is that like there is so much spell and trap removal, and there's also like decrees and stuff that people can side in after.
Ooh, wow.
Going for the TT here. That's a very high value TT because that set was indeed a serpent. Used up a reborn. History wide one set
reborn and a snatch.
I mean, likely the serpent, right? Like, I can't really think of much else they'd want to set beside maybe like Faith. But either way,
Sinister back to hand.
Yeah,
add Sinister back to hand.
Yeah, no, Ragged Dragon forgot as well. Oh, damn. We're out here forgetting. I mean, again, as I mentioned, like it is a common misplay. Like the funny thing is that like and that it didn't even matter there. Fiber Jar coming down, and very, very good Fiber Jar. It's Provider One says thank you to try and maybe unbrick themselves, but they're 3,800 life points to Ragged Dragon 7,700, and Ragged Dragon gets to attack in first here. So I'm not necessarily sure it's the best for History of YGO1. But we'll have to see what happens.
You know how this would work in the anime. They would say I flip my Fiber Jar, and I add my Sinister Serpent to hand as it's doing it, so I get to keep my Sinister Serpent.
That would be very funny. Funnily enough, a card that saw play in the last Yata tournament was Time Seal, because Time Seal is one of the few cards that actually gets around Fiber Jar in the sense that it lingers.
What an incredible opening. Pot of Greed and Dod's Luke.
Yeah, that is really, really good for Raga Drago here. Only thing better could be like if you also draw Hand Rips or something. Also, knowing that History of YGO is on the knock after siding is, I think, very important.
Wow.
Ooh, drop off. Okay. Interesting card, but, you know, I see it. I see it. Oof. Yeah, maybe a bit of an overcommitment into the back row there.
Yeah, definitely.
Given the Harpies. And then the Graceful coming down now. Drawing History YGO 1 into a potential out.
Now notice if we just flip the turns that Fiber Jar was used, Blah would have gotten to drop Graceful.
Yep.
Set Magician of Faith, get it back.
And Pot.
But all that, yeah. And Pot.
I mean, History of YGO 1, Fiber Jar, Pot, and Graceful. Name a more iconic quartet, I guess.
I hate this game. I hate this game.
Snatch Deal. But the thing is, you know, I still think Raga Drago is favored from this position. It may seem weird to think so, but like, you know, I mean, they can play around Dawn, and they're gaining back 1,000 every turn. Fiber Jar gets hit. But honestly, like, if you're Raga Drago, you're pretty fine with losing that, I think. Yeah, they gain back 1,000 every turn. They got Elf here.
Tomato would have been tough, but
Tomato would have been great here.
Yeah.
But this is still pretty good. Dealing 5. And now...
It's at exactly lethal.
Yep, exact lethal. History YG 1 can't ring the Elf if they draw a ring. So I think this is very, very good.
It.
Yeah, this could be the end of the game. Very little they can...
Wow.
Oh, Scapegoat. Yep, Scapegoat will protect them for a little bit longer. But now Raga Drago has a bit of a win con if they draw a ring. And, you know, that... I mean, I guess History YG 1 could potentially be playing Book of Moon, given they are on restricts. But, I don't know. I think that, Coffee. I mean, yeah, if you got it, flaunt it. Ooh, Io comes down here. Maybe the correct order there should have been Comfy in main phase 1, force out a potential IO. But I mean, I also understand going for Comfy now, right? Because like you want to know what the board state is like before you go for that.
You want to take a metamorphosis.
Yeah.
Now, are you ready for History of YGO 1 to top deck a Shallow Grave and special summon the Fiber Jar?
That would be very funny, but unfortunately, it can't even work through IO. Bazoo coming down here, and Bazoo going to banish one from grave. Are they going to banish another from grave? Is the question. No, just one. So 1900, and this is actually a very heads up play on Raga Drago's part. It may seem weird.
In case of
but
snatch or
in case of a restrict, because what restrict has to do is restrict has to eat up the elf and then either crash into the Bazoo and Raigeki. Yeah, Raigeki does clear the board, so you know it is top deck mode for Raga Drago. But we'll have to see if History of YGO 1 is able to capitalize on that at all.
It's one card advantage versus 4,000 or so life points.
Yeah. Oh, Sangan is very, very good here, though. And honestly, I do think that like playing around the meta was the right choice because you know meta's at 3 copies, Raigeki is at 1. So like, you know, if you're playing around one or the other, it makes more sense to play around meta. Oh, it looks like they remembered to add back the Serpent, which could mean that there's another metamorphosis in their future. But
Solaris points out that Blah did not have a Yata on that last turn.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. That would be... Ooh, the Faith comes out and grabs back a Charity.
Yeah, I guess it's basically a better Pot of Greed with the Serpent in hand.
Yeah. Which is another reason why, you know, you add back the Serpent. But, Adrian Brunner also says the Bazoo also plays around Reborn, which is also a very good point. Because like if they had a clear plus Reborn, then that would be pretty rough. So they're gonna pitch a Serpent and a Scapegoat there, and they did probably get the meta or a Hot S. Yeah, Hot S comes down there.
I'm gonna call it.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, Ring ends the game here. So there are still outs that Raga Drago has in their deck. But, the
Call
outs
an
are a bit
ambulance.
further between.
And what? Are we on the game 2 or game 3?
This is game 2.
I feel like I've watched 5.
I know, right? But it is in History of Wajo 1's favor. So if History of Wajo 1 does win this one, then they will indeed win the match.
I need that to be a ring that he's holding for no reason.
Well, there actually is a reason to hold it, because if History of Wajo 1 chains book, then you want to do it in battle phase.
Chain
right?
book anyway.
Well, no, but you want to do it in battle phase, so that way they can't. Well, actually, they wouldn't be able to
Yeah.
flip it back up based on how the rules of the game work at this time.
All right. One more try. Come on.
If it's ring, that's a draw. Oh, Raigeki is pretty great here. Wow.
And he hits a witch.
Hits a witch, so that will get a search.
Can he search Yata? Is he main decking it?
I mean, that's the question, right? But it looks like Rise Solar had mentioned no Yata and Drago. I don't think we've seen Yata in these games that we've seen from History of Wajo 1. So pre-mat, though, is pretty good. But Io comes down. That is really, really good for Raga Drago here.
That's right. Oh, wow. This is 1100 to 2400.
Oh, yeah. 1,400 monster coming down here. And yeah, that
Ring of Destruction. Ring of
Destruction would go crazy here. But yeah, I mean, Change of Heart would also win the game. Snatch Steal would win the game. Like, there are a lot of different things here that could potentially.
He's holding.
That's no Change of Heart.
It's Snatch.
They're thinking. Well, they're thinking. The fact that they're thinking means it can't be Snatch. Raigeki could be good, but Raigeki's in Grave. Yeah, Adrian Brenner says ring for the draw would be. I mean, that would be the draw option.
Does he have? Is it exiled?
If it's exiled, that's you. If it's exiled, you have to drop the IO. Because your opponent can just summon out Serpent, right?
What did he draw?
Here. Can't be Fiber.
What did he draw? No, because it was Fiber. He wouldn't think on IO.
Well, yeah, but also it can't be Fiber because Fiber's engraved. But yep, Change of Heart will indeed do it. I mean, you had to do that either way because Jinzo is in hand. Right?
Show the monster. Yeah, you're right. You are right, though.
I think the Raga Drago Fibering was honestly a good choice. I don't know. I think that, given the situation at the time, it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, because he doesn't know his hands. I think Fiber was the right play there. It was
Yata. Oh, wow. Oh, that's funny. But yeah, you gotta let the IO lapse because, your opponent can just bring out Jinzo anyways, right? To get around it. So, yeah. But, whew, very, very good game. It seems like Rago had the winning hand there anyways. But yeah, Monster Reborn would have also...
could have only gotten an elf, though.
Yeah, no, wouldn't have quite have done it. No, it could have gotten Bazoo, which could have gone up to 25. Yeah, that would have done it. That would have done it.
That would have been game.
Yeah, it would have been game. Yeah.
Oh,
woo.
No.
Very, very intense games.
And you're telling me we have more Yu-Gi-Oh?
Yep, one more match. Adrian Brunner says that was a great match. It was indeed. And I'm hoping that the last match of the night will also be a great one. Because we have got Aratos versus Blah, aka History of YGO1. For all the Yata marbles. We'll have to see which deck manages to make it to the top. Red Eye Solaris says, so Yata technically did win it, lol. And yeah, I mean, Change of Heart, flip up the Yata. Unfortunately, I don't think there was a way to make Yata have the lethal attack there. But, that happens sometimes. And we are going to go into the last match Aratos is hosting for History of YGO1 to go into. Janter Zone says, this should be a doozy. It should indeed. We are 2 hours and 43 minutes into the stream here, if my math is correct. And
that's great.
Yeah, no, it's been intense locals. But I mean, I don't know. That's part of the fun.
We're getting a short break from Blah.
Okay, I mean that's fair. They've been going on for a while here. They've had very, very long games in each of their matches, and they've been playing since the bottom of the bracket. So,
Fill us in for the noobs out here. Fill us in, B-Sox. If he flipped that Yata, whose hand does it go back to?
It would. You mean at the end of the turn? It would go
Yeah.
back to. Well, so. Yeah, it would go back to. It would go
I think
back
it's the
to
original.
Bragodrago's turn or hand. But what I was thinking of there is that like, do spirits work the same way as Wicked Worm Beast? Because Wicked Worm Beast only says during your end phase, but I think spirits say during both end phases. I think.
Yeah, let me search.
I mean, I
Yata
can
real
check.
quick.
We got a break between the matches here, so let's just look up Yata.
It says during the end phase of the turn, it was
normal summon flip face up. So yeah, it would go back to Bragodrago's hand. Yeah, the OG owner. Yeah, as Jan just said. But yeah, very, very intense games there. History Wide One says, talk about Drama Llama 6. If you're just joining the stream, the reason why they're having these locals in Yata format is because there is a Yata tournament starting tomorrow on the Format Library Discord server. Be sure to hop on over to that server. Links in the description down below. If you do want to play in that upcoming tournament, if these games have sort of gotten you a bit interested in this format, and it might be something that you enjoy, then it's the perfect time to get into it as that tournament is going on. So that starts tomorrow at, I believe, sometime in the afternoon EST. I forget the exact time in the afternoon. But you have until then to sign up. The information is all on the Format Library Discord server. So be sure to head on over there.
Step away one final time.
Yeah. And yeah, this will be the last match for us tonight. And it looks like they are indeed beginning. So let's just dive into it. See who will win, Aratos or History of YGO 1. And this will be a very, very intense match here. Looks like Aratos is starting, though. And going first in this format is very, very important. You know, there are the hand rips. There are great things to set up as well. So, yeah. Looks like there's the T set and pass back. The classic. And it looks like a Mystic Tomato is going to come down there, hit into the set, and hit over a Sangan. So the Sangan will get a search here. What's it going to search out? A lot of good options. Exiled could do it. You know, pop the tomato. And Exiled will get searched out indeed. So they'll be able to pop the tomato. You know, get rid of that annoying monster. And potentially make something else happen. There is a debate, like, do you just leave your board open, like, you know, for the Exiled? But I think it might be worth it. They're going to go for a Jar as well here, just to sort of draw into more options to do. And that's part of why I think Jar is, like, a very good card. Oh, Comfy is very good. Seeing what the follow-up play is here on History YG1's part, that can really help decide, you know, do I go into Exile? Do I do something else? So I think that is a good play. And they're going to hit a Monster Reborn. Yeah, that's probably the best of the cards you can take if you're playing on Exiling a Tomato. The Exiled will come down, pop the Tomato, and looks like Aratos is just going to set one, pass back. Looks like no blind MST in the end phase there. So it may not be an MST, maybe something else, but yeah. History YG1 is just going to set one, pass back to Aratos. And Aratos is going to blind MST their new set. It's a Scapegoat. So very, very good hit there, as Scapegoat has been taking names pretty much all night, as we've seen. Reaper coming down, hitting in directly for 300. Will that go through? It will indeed go through, so that will rip a card out of History of YG1's hand. I'll rip the one close to the extra deck, hitting a Metamorphosis, which would have been very powerful with the Scapegoat. Oh, it also makes sense that Aratos blind hit the new back row, because they might have seen it in History of YG1's hand. Change of Heart will pop the Spirit Reaper, as we saw earlier. That will happen here
too. And I'm back.
Yeah. Oh, Premat is interesting here. We'll bring back the Tomato, but TT for the Tomato. Okay.
And I do want all the viewers and you to get in your finals fiber prediction. How many times will we see Fiber Jar resolve in the finals?
That's a very, very good question. I mean, given how the game is going so far, maybe none this first duel. This first game has been very much just like classic one-for-one trades, just back and forth interaction. And I mean, you love to see that. Painful choice coming down here. It might be a very, very painful choice for History of YGO1, given that they're down to 2 cards. Ratos is at 4, given this. Adrian Brunner says 3 times. I'm going to go with I'm gonna go with 2. I'm calling that now. Based on how this first game's going, I'm gonna say 2. I may be doing the prices right, like sort of like under over sort of thing, but I'm gonna call 2. And Serpent,
and B-Stock's angry
I
as
know
Serpent is sent.
another Serpent gets sent. But yeah, I mean, like I don't know. They're giving the Jinzo. That is not what I would have picked there.
I was thinking about the Jinzo because it's so strong off of Reborn and Premature.
Yeah, you can reborn a Sangan and then tribute it off for Jinzo, right?
Yeah.
So I don't really think you mind if they give you the Jinzo there and you do have reborn, right? So
maybe Blah has confiscation or something, or forceful maybe. No,
if it's
forceful,
forceful,
you
you add Serpent because then Serpent gets sent back to the deck. Like in general, there's really no reason if your opponent sends a Serpent. There's generally no reason to give them back the Serpent unless you have a way to banish it from the grave.
So I think we were maybe you overthought that one.
Yeah, maybe. And I mean that is something too. Like if you are in a situation where you might lose the game soon, maybe something will happen. I thought there was gonna be standby phase trap dust shoot. But looks like standby phase call because they do know about the Jinzo there. So gotta fire it off quick.
Now what would be hilarious here is he tributes it for Hades.
That would be very, very funny. I mean, there's also a question, like, if you're a Rageous, do you tribute it at all? You have the read that the other back row that History of Wagyu 1 has might be dead, right? Because they haven't used it the entire game. And like if it was a ring, a Mirror Force, or like a TT, those would have gotten used up already because Rageous hit in with a Spirit Reaper directly into History of Wagyu 1's life points. So, and this is what I was saying, like. Nope. Calling back the Jinzo would be kind of rough. And, maybe that's why History of Wagyu 1 gave them the Jinzo because then they could call targeting Jinzo, chaining to the call here. But
that's a power play.
Yeah, that's the end of the game. Yep. The power of Bazoo there really showing off. But yeah, it was kind of just like over no matter which way it went. And I don't know. I feel like, I guess like, yeah, so the fact that they had call in hand to then like set and then, Races wouldn't be able to chain their call, like that is something, sure. But I don't think that call was set on Aratus' turn, right? Like, I think that call was a new set. So like, you just revive the Jinzo, but I don't know. I don't think it's really that, like, I don't know. For me, it wasn't the best play, but I could definitely see there being some edge cases. Maybe, thinking through different things work out a bit differently. But I don't know. I don't know what was in History of Wagyu 1's hand when that happened. So
now with a game already over, I'm cheating a bit, but I'm going to predict 0 Fiber Jars. I think we see Fiber Jar get knocked on this game.
Oh, 0 completely. I mean, that might be after siding, After siding, you can definitely bring in the knocks, bring in the removal for Fiber Jar. Like, a bit tricky. Adrian Brunner brings up a very, very good point. I wouldn't give Serpent because they'll probably forget about it anyways. And I mean, I think we have seen that happen in previous games in this stream. So that is very, very funny. And honestly true, right? Like maybe not at the top levels of tournament play, but if you're playing like a locals match or something like that, I think that is a very fair assessment. Painful Choice coming down here.
Waz not going to send Serpent. I already know.
That's the question. Will they send Serpent? Will they not send Serpent? Send 3 hand reps, send a pot, and see, like in a situation like this, like if you're sending Serpent, like it's you want to send stuff that actually gives your opponent a painful choice. Graceful Charity gets added to hand. They might.
He didn't even think about it. Just immediate Graceful Charity.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense. Like in this format, you like Pot of Greed's a +1, whereas Graceful Charity is like a neutral, unless you have Serpent in hand already. So like. In this format, I think Graceful is. Oh well, he had Serpent already.
Definitely better now.
Yeah, it's definitely better now. But I think in this format, like if you don't have Serpent, like Graceful is arguably worse than Pot, as an opener, right? So
now Arados must have had a very strong hand because he did not want any of those hand rips coming down. Let's see what he has.
Oh yeah, Change of Heart, very, very good here. Potentially grabbing a Magician of Faith to get back that Change of Heart. Could have also been a bait from History of YGO1. Looks like it was just a witch. I mean, I feel like that was probably the right play to do the change there either way. But yeah, Ray just getting a little bit punished for the change there. But, they would have gotten majorly punished if they didn't fire the change. And it was
Yeah, you have to think about, it looks like he wasted the Change of Heart because he's -1 now. But if that was Magician of Faith, he would have had Serpent back in hand and Graceful back in hand.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, I was mentioning earlier, you kind of have to know what to play around. And I think this was definitely a case of that, right? Like, you got to think like, okay, if it is Faith, I'm like just majorly screwed.
No way that's Faith. Come on.
Fiber Jar.
Wow.
Fiber Jar also makes the Change of Heart play make sense because you can get a bit more aggressive. And, just get into the chip damage, Fiber Jar next turn, and feel fine about that. But, yeah, I don't count that as a Fiber Jar going off for the count.
Exactly.
Yeah. Dark Hole here is fairly good there. I mean, they get a search off Witch. Witch could actually search out Faith, which would be kind of rough for Aratos if they're not packing Noblemans. But, oh, well, Reaper could rip the Faith out of hand. Oh, but not under a TT. So this could be pretty rough for Aratos here.
And B-Sox, that's why you don't run Trap Hole.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the TT is the better card to run in Yata. Because you've got Yata Garasu, you've got Reaper. So I think that the tide has shifted to TT being better than the Trap Hole there. And will we see a Magician of Faith get flipped here? I mean, very likely. There's really not much disadvantage to setting the Faith here. Unless you're worried about the knock, which is fair. If you're worried about knock, that's fair not to set it. But then you just go for the play. And Reborn on probably the Jinzo, I assume. It is indeed going for the Jinzo here. Time Seal gets fired as a chain to that, so that way History of YG1 will not draw next turn. But, I mean, honestly, if you're History of YG1, you don't really need to draw through natural means. Because
especially if you can flip Magician of Faith here.
Exactly. Yep, and that is indeed the Magician of Faith there. Grabbing back any number of powerful spells. I mean, honestly, maybe the change would have been the best pick there because you change the set, summon out another monster, get in for lethal. But, I mean, maybe they're just looking for more removal. Maybe they're looking for something. Hard to say without knowing their hand. I mean, they've probably got a lot of options in hand there.
In these older formats, I don't think there is not, from my play anyway, and I'm terrible, so don't take my word for this. But personally, there is no card that feels stronger than Graceful Charity when I have Serpent in hand. That feels like the strongest card in the game.
I feel like IO when your opponent plays a Graceful Charity with Serpent in hand. Feels strong to me. Summon out a Lesser Fiend here. Was
that sided?
It might be sided in. It might just be in the deck because it's a good meta target.
Wow.
Oh, that's unfortunate. I feel like History of YG1 just could have gone for lethal there, I think, with the change. If they had Lesser Fiend in hand, I mean, they could have drawn it off the Graceful, but like...
and so we know that's a Spy in hand, so this is about the end of the road.
Snatch Steal does help out a fair bit here, taking the Jinzo. Normal summoning the Spy because, you might as well. If your opponent has like an MST or something, it's kind of all over anyways. So you might as well just get aggressive, assume that the Jinzo is going to stay on field, and
And Blah may have the fiber in hand, so he just needs to get the damage in while he can.
Yeah, exactly. Snatch Steal will increase.
Wait, I thought that was Time Seal's turn.
It was Time Seal's turn. That was Time Seal's turn. Okay. Well, wait. Was that the card that was drawn or not?
I don't know if he shuffled.
Yeah, no, that was History of YG1. Okay. Looks like
I don't think I saw him shuffle. Yeah.
Looks like I think they are listening to the stream, so they do know. They do hear that. But yeah, it was not the Jinjo was reborn, so it wasn't a double tribute summon that turn. Unfortunately. Time Seal rarely seems to be efficient, says Jinjo, and I honestly agree. Like I feel like I personally am not the biggest fan of Time Seal. But I get the play for like when fiber gets flipped, it can get through fiber, and it is something like to bait out your opponent's spawn trap removal. But honestly, whenever I get time sealed, I'm just like, I am perfectly okay with that. Unless my opponent also has a Yata, you know. But like, I'm like, yep, this is absolutely fine. So I'm not the biggest time seal fan, but you know, some people like it, and it has seen tournament success. So whether that's because of the time seal or not depends. You know, can be debated. But
and as we all expected, game 3, 5 minutes in.
Yeah, I'm kind of shocked this game has gone so quickly, but very, very cool to see at least. And they're going to do a T set to open up. So no hand rips, it looks like, in the opener. Will we see Pot Graceful yet again from History of YGO1 for, I don't know, the 6th time tonight? How many times?
For the 7th time in 2 games.
Yeah. Okay, looks
please
like...
be Magician of Faith.
Well, that would be very funny if it was Magician of Faith, because there are no spells in Grave. But it looks like it's just a Mystic Tomato tributing off for a Jinzo there. Hitting it for 2,400. That's still very, very good. Gets the damage in early. And removes a pesky card.
Wow.
Duo also coming down here. So depriving Aratos of 2 more cards in hand.
I mean, if you don't have Serpent, wow,
hitting a snatch
what he needed.
That is very unfortunate. Pitching another Tomato, though, which means that Aratos might have a way to deal with the Jinzo there.
Yeah, because he could have... Well, no.
Could have set Tomato.
Is Aratos the guy with the Spirit Reapers?
I believe we saw a Spirit Reaper from Aratos, yeah. But yeah, like, Tomato could have gotten him back, or could have gotten him a monster, at least, to defend himself. So, Red Solaris asks, will it be Jin's over? That's the question, ain't it? This Jinzo hitting in to a Reaper. Yep, there's a Reaper. So there are ways to out the Reaper. It's a set monster. Could be a Magician of Faith there. So if that's a Magician of Faith, grabbing back Snatch, that would be kind of rough. But they're setting another monster, so... Or not grabbing back Snatch, but grabbing back Change. Oh, well, Raigeki, you know, that will stop that as well.
Newdoria.
Wow. Newdoria would have been pretty good there, because Newdoria gets to destroy a monster when destroyed by battle. Faith grabbing back a card here, grabbing back the Pot, and this is gonna get pretty disgusting here. Pot draw 2. Honestly, did you even need the Pot?
I would have grabbed Duo personally. I don't think it matters, but Jinzo versus and a full hand versus 1 card.
Yeah, I feel like Duo would have been the pick. Like, you're already up enough on cards. Like, honestly, even like Change of Heart would have maybe been better, because Change of Heart, you just take whatever they bring out next turn, and like you just win from there. But I mean, they're in a good enough position that they don't really need to worry about that, I guess. But yeah, it's going to be very, very tough for Aratos to claw their way back from here.
Now, Solaris asked you, will history break the Aratos streak?
That's the question. I mean, it depends to be seen. It really depends on this turn. The fact that Aratos... Like, I mean, there are many, many things that kill Aratos here, but Reborn is a pretty good start. Bring back the Reaper. Set in another. There are many things that can out Reaper, but if History of YG1 does not have them... Well,
Dark Hole Reborn
will probably be the end of the game.
Reaper.
Even if it's not Reborn, you get a search off the Witch. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, double Reaper.
You have to know with Raigeki and Grave and 2 Reapers on field, he felt safe there.
Yeah. And searching out the Tomato. Pre-mat will win the game here if Aratos doesn't have any sort of counterplay to this. But they're going for Jinzo. That will indeed be the end of the game there. So, wow, what a tournament run. What a locals run from History of YGO1. And they also had Reborn as well. So, yeah. I mean, you know, that's Yata for you. Can occasionally wind up in these pretty sacky game states. But still very, very cool to see. And they definitely wound up being grinds for a fair amount of them. So, I think the grindy games make up for the games where your opponent just pot Gracefuls and stuff. But yeah, it was indeed Jin's over.
0 fiber jars.
Yeah. So I think no one was expecting 0 fiber jars that game. But very, very cool to see. So that will indeed be Blah winning the locals this week. So very, very cool to see. And Yeah, so they will be the new locals legends. I mean, they've already won locals in the past, so they're already a locals legend. But yeah, they won in the Yata tournament this time as well. So let's see if we can get them in on the stream here to discuss their deck and what they thought of the matches there.
This entire this entire tournament is why I love Yata. So many big moments.
Oh yeah, very
And
cool to see. Welcome Blah. Welcome to the stream.
Congratulations on the win,
on
Blah.
your
Y'all
victory.
enjoyed
Yeah.
Goat
What?
Goat control.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily
Goat
call that
control.
goat control, but I would call that a
It was
meta control.
It's basically Scapegoat and Metamorphosis. It's not Tsukiyomi, but this is the iteration before Tsukiyomi.
Well, the thing is, like, the reason why I generally sort of bounce back against calling this sort of deck goat control is because, like, the loop in goat control that controls the game is that Tsukiyomi restrict loop. Like, just having restrict on field is not necessarily controlling the game because you don't have control of the situation. You can only really do stuff with restrict until you necessarily tribute it off. So I generally don't call that. I like to call it like meta control or like a meta deck. But you can call it what you want. I mean, you won the game there. So, oh, Cole says, change your DB name to Blata Yak, which would be very funny to see. Although I'm actually not sure how to change a name on DB. But I think there is a way, but I just forget what it is. But anyways, congratulations again. So, as you won that that locals very well, and so I'm wondering, given the tournament starts tomorrow, the Drama Llama 6, so what are your thoughts on, like, potentially the deck that you brought? Do you think that it could potentially win that tournament or do well in that tournament? Do you think there were any, like, flaws in the deck that you noticed that you might want to change, like, going into that tournament? Like, what are your general thoughts on the deck?
I really like the deck. Very much.
Do you have any?
I didn't get to play Creature Swap. It bricked me on that game 1, but it's still pretty useful when it's allowed to go off. But
do you think,
otherwise, it's like
so
Scapegoat, Metamorphosis, yada yada.
So do you think
and Sinister Serpent.
So do you think that you'd swap out the Creature Swap in the future for something else potentially?
Oh, it's fine as it is. It just didn't do well this time. But Creature Swap, because my deck is filled with small monsters like Tomato, Sangan, Witch, Serpent, even Moth once it's used up, I can just give it to my opponent.
Yeah,
it just didn't translate this time.
Yeah, we saw there that, like, in game 1 of the finals match, it actually bricked you up and potentially lost you the game, having that dead Creature Swap. So, wouldn't like, did it go off at all in the locals?
It happens.
Did it go off at all in the locals?
I rarely had it in hand. That was the first time I actually had it in hand at the start of a duel. I just didn't have anything to work with it.
Okay. So, that's something to consider for people out there wanting to try the deck. Bloss thinks that the Creature Swap is still good, but, it did brick. So, whether you want to keep it in or not, that's up to y'all out there. But still very cool to see meta go off. Now, did you ever meta, like, one of your tribute monsters, like a Parshath or a Hades, into, like, Senji or Balter? Or was it always restrict?
No. It was always restrict.
Okay. So
the deck just works very well at doing that.
Yeah. And Scapegoat did come in clutch there. It blocked a lot of aggressive pushes and saved you multiple times against, like, your opponent's Jinzos and things like that. So what are your thoughts about Scapegoat, not just in this deck, but in general in the format?
It's still pretty solid. It works well.
Okay.
But it's also kind of niche. Because, like, it works well in combination with other cards. Like, here in this deck, it was with Metamorphosis as well as Defense. Hayabusa OTK. It works with Hayabusa Knight. But as a main deck card, I'm not 100% sure because, well, Torrential Tribute is abused.
Well, the reason I bring it up is because we saw multiple times, like, especially in your matches with, like, Dump Truck and stuff, we saw you using Scapegoat defensively and blocking some major aggressive pushes and some major attacks. And so, like, it looked like it could have been a good general card as well there. But it's tough to say. And, this is sort of like in the vacuum of this tournament, right? It did well, but I'm curious to see if after this local stream, like, if people are going to potentially put things in to adjust for Scapegoat more. Like, maybe people were playing less like TT this format. or this locals or something like that. But maybe seeing the scapegoats, they're gonna adjust more for that.
It feels like there's a bit of an ebb and flow to it. Like, ironically, you talked about GOAT format. This is probably a format unlike Yata and Vampire for different reasons. Vampire because it has a lot of the GOAT format decks, like Warrior, Skill Drain decks, Zombies, etc. But this deck plays more like GOAT format Classic before Chaos Turbo was figured out.
Well,
Kind of slow, not really slow. Yeah, there was the Parshath. I did have Parshath. I was talking about in general because you have Charity, Pot. You have these power cards, but it's not that much higher above GOAT in power.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean,
if I think DM-oriented formats, it'd be like most of 2004, probably Warrior, Yata, Vampire, Breaker, Yata, then GOAT.
I would say I'd agree. I think that's part of why I'd say it's part of why a lot of GOAT players do enjoy Yata format quite a bit because you know, like there are a lot of similarities between GOAT and Yata in terms of feel. And I think part of the feel is like the power level of the game. You're not getting Signing Stuff Decayed. You're not like getting Chaos Emperor Dragon Yata locked. You know, there's a variety of things going on. But yeah, so I hope
You're
that
not
like
even getting BLS'd.
well, yeah,
You're not even getting
that
BLS'd.
goes along with the chaos stuff. But yeah, so I hope that you know your victory here with this deck, you know, maybe inspires people to experiment more before the Drama Llama Classic. And are you planning on playing in that event like with this sort of deck, or you don't have to spoil like what deck you might be playing, but yeah. I mean, hopefully this inspires more people to do that with that deck. But yeah, it would be cool to see how it goes in the big monthly. But anyways, before I close out the stream, congratulations again. But also, Red Solaris says Wanghu definitely could be coming in more in the main deck, or even maybe in the side deck. It would be interesting to see if people start siding in Wanghu more. Because like Wanghu is definitely like a main or side card and breaker, but maybe you know if this people are playing more scapegoats, playing like as you say the goat control sort of strategy. You know maybe Wanghu could have a place. I mean, Wanghu also stopped Thousand Eyed Restrict from coming out as well. So, you know, definitely an
GBO. Yeah, GBO did bring Double Recruiter again. He won it with Fiber and he tried it in Yata. He just fell short.
I mentioned that
I think that deck's also yeah. I'm just repeating it. I just think that deck is also a potentially viable deck as well.
It would be interesting to see. I mean, yeah, and as you say, like Wanghu was good against that deck too. So, you know, it hits more than one deck in the metagame here. So it'd be cool to see. Although I'm not necessarily as sold on the Double Recruiter deck. I will be curious to see if people do more with it in this upcoming Yata tournament. But I really hope, you know, if you're watching the stream and you enjoyed the games that you saw here and you want to play them for yourselves, definitely join the Drama Llama Classic 6 on Format Library. Should be a lot of fun. And, you know, let's try and get this tournament as big as possible to see as many decks as possible and see, like, what rises to the top. So, yeah.
Let's see if this works quickly.
So that will be my main message there. And, yeah, with that, I think I'm going to probably call the stream here. But again, congratulations, Blah, on your victory and for showing that, you know, Metamorphosis-based deck, you know, GOAT control, if you want to call it that, does have some legs in this format and can potentially take names. So I'm very excited to see how this will affect the decks people bring to tomorrow's tournament. But I hope that you all
One
enjoyed.
last thing.
Okay, what's the last thing?
Yeah, it's saying basically in Vampire format, they did start playing GOAT control because of Tsukiyomi, but I'm wondering because this deck will alter quite a bit.
It won't quite work based on the current ruling that we know about. I need to check when that ruling changes, and I will check that by the time the guide comes out.
Slightly false. It can work if Tur is in defense mode.
Well, yes, but that's a very like you know that's not like what GOAT control players want to do with the deck, right? Because that takes multiple turns to set up. because basically what we're referring to is at the time of this format, Yata format, and some formats beyond it, you can't actually change the battle position of a monster twice in the same turn, except if you do it with an effect the second time. So, for instance, if you flip down Thousand Eyed Restrict from attack to face down defense with Book of Moon, and then you try and flip summon it, you can't actually do that because its battle position has been changed once, and thus you can't manually change it afterwards. So, what you have to do if you want to, set up the sort of Thousand Eyed Restrict, flip face down, and then flip back up to suck up a monster, is you have to switch Thousand Eyed Restrict to defense, then flip it down, but then you can't flip it up that turn. So you have to switch to defense the previous turn, then on the next turn, fire the book, or the Souk in this case, then flip it up. But that takes more turns of setup than in GOAT format and GOAT control. So it's a lot less good to actually do that combo, really. But
I was mentioning Vampire, but I was actually talking about Breaker because the deck will look a lot more like GOAT control with Breaker and Tribe. And you can even use Scientist.
It would, but I mean,
pretty
I
effective.
think based on what we've discovered, the rulings at the time are still that you can't switch the battle position twice. Even so that's based on what our current historical knowledge is, where the deck is kind of hampered by that a bit, and the main way to make this deck is not really playing the Book of Moons and just playing Tribute monsters instead. But maybe with more historical discoveries that may change, but that would require more historical research, and it would require contrary sources to be dug up.
The pain.
Yeah, I mean,
especially what's coming up.
Well, we'll have to,
December, gone.
We'll have to, explore that and see that as we cover it. So I'm looking forward to covering that. We'll be moving into Vampire format quite soon on the channel. Expect that coming out next week. And yeah, thank you all for tuning in to the stream here. I'm probably going to wrap it up now. It's been going on for 3 hours and 15 minutes, which is a pretty long stream for us, but a very, very good one either way. And yeah, thank you for everyone who played, for playing in the tournament. And yeah, and I hope to see y'all in the next one. So I'm going to leave it there. And yeah, see y'all next time.
See you later.
Okay.